Chapter 30:14. Mu Shumin could not quell the hatred in his heart, but due to Mu Linfeng's words, he could only glare hatefully at Jiang Qiming. The two families had fallen out just like that. Naturally, Jiang Qiming did not intend to have any interaction with the Mu family. She was also clear that because of this accident, the marriage between the Muse and the Songs was probably off. Therefore, with the mentality of if you don't let me have a good time, I won't let you have a good time either, she naturally did not hold back when she spoke. There's nothing much to say. This Mu family is no longer the Mu family of the past. At least when Yaja was around, Gu Jinglian wouldn't bully us like this. If Gu Jinglian wanted to flare up, he would have to take Yaja's face into consideration. But now that Yaja is no longer around, this Mu family used to be a lion. Now, it's more like a down-and-out lion king that has been chased out of its tribe. How dare it still want to claim its territory as the king? Forget it. Let's think about how to clean up the mess we've created first. Jiang Qiming seemed to only be satisfied after shouting these words at the top of her lungs. Little did she know that when Mu Linfeng heard this, he felt a lot of emotions. His blood rushed to his heart and his body swayed a little. These words, however, pierced into the bottom of his heart. These days there were many people who spoke ill of the Mu family. Jiang Qiming's words were undoubtedly a critical hit. Mu Yanqing hurriedly held him. Seeing his uncle's ugly expression, he was even more furious. He shouted at Jiang Qiming, "Do you think the Song family is any better? Jiang Qiming, don't be so shameless. Gu Jinglian said that the Song family will become a thing of the past tomorrow. You should think about how you're going to live your life." With that, he supported Mu Linfeng and left. Mu Shumin also left with his men. The venue was empty in an instant. Jiang Qiming felt aggrieved, but now that the situation was critical, she could not be bothered to be angry at Mu Yanqing's words. She hurriedly made a call. Half an hour later, the ambulance rushed over and carried everyone into the vehicle. Along the way, the medical staff checked on Song Enya and Song Jinggua's injuries. Although their injuries were serious, fortunately, their vital signs were stable. Jiang Qiming was so worried that it was as if the sky was about to collapse. She was in utter despair. If something were to happen to Song Jinggua, she wouldn't know what to do. They were worried that Song Enya, who had just suffered a miscarriage, would not be able to take it. Fortunately, the medical staff said that her life was not in danger, and they could only confirm it after a series of tests. Her heart was in a state of disarray again. The two were sent to the hospital. Song Jinggua and Song Enya were sent to the emergency room one after another, leaving Jiang Qiming waiting outside the operating theater. She didn't have any cash on her, but the moment she entered the hospital and revealed her identity, the hospital immediately said that they would do their best to save her. Jiang Qiming made a few calls to the Song family's main house. Not long after, Song Jianjun rushed over with his men. At this time, Song Jinggua had already been pushed out of the operating room and transferred to the intensive care unit. Song Jianjun looked at his brother's appearance. The doctor told him that there were no other injuries, just a severe concussion and a few broken bones in his body. There was no danger to his life. However, at Song Jinggua's age, the injuries to his muscles and bones would probably take a long time to recover. Chapter 30:15. Worried that something had happened to him, she was so frightened that tears fell from her eyes as she looked at Song Jinggua, who was lying on the bed on the verge of death. Song Jianjun asked angrily, "Qiming, don't just cry. Why don't you at least tell me what's going on?" Today was Song Enya's wedding, so Song Jianjun was in the June district. He was not present and only sent a red packet because he did not know what had happened. Jiang Qiming immediately told him everything. When Song Jianjun heard that it was Gu Jinglian who had beaten someone up to this state, he was even more shocked. How did you offend someone like Gu Jinglian? Song Jianjun had a deep memory of Gu Jinglian's name. It was not for any other reason but because Gu Jinglian was probably the first person in history to have led a group of people to smash up the June district's courtyard. Back then, a certain second-generation heir from the June district's courtyard had somehow run over to the Gu family's gambling den to gamble and ended up with a huge debt. However, this fellow was probably full of himself and did not think much of the Gu family because of his background. At that time, the Gu family had a change of dynasty, and Gu Jinglian had just ascended to the throne. He thought that even if he offended this inexperienced calf, it wouldn't cause much of a stir. However, this fellow did not gloat for long. The next day, Gu Jinglian sent people with dozens of men to smash his house's courtyard into smithereens. Gu Jinglian's methods were surprisingly ruthless. Apart from the living, everything that could be formed in the house was smashed. He threatened to break his limbs if he did not return the money within 3 days. That young master was finally scared out of his wits. He scraped together the money and returned it. The Gu family sent word that he had only returned the principal and had not paid off the interest. A few years had passed since the incident, but this pitiful young master was still gritting his teeth to repay the interest. This loan shark's interest had accumulated from millions to tens of millions, and then to hundreds of millions. No matter what, after rounding it up, he still owed a few million. Therefore, Gu Jinglian's name left a deep impression on Song Jianjun. He could not help but be on tenterhooks. He discussed with his wife whether they should send Song Zhenghua and Song Enya overseas for medical treatment. Jiang Qiming, however, refused. Song Zhenghua was a mayor after all. No matter how arrogant the Gu family was, they would not be so arrogant, right? Sending them overseas for medical treatment, in the eyes of outsiders, was no different from a stray dog. The Song family had already been humiliated enough. Jiang Qiming only took Gu Jinglian's words as a threat. There was no need to take them seriously. Unfortunately, not long after she finished speaking, Song Enya came out of the emergency room. The doctor was still informing her of her injuries, saying that the Missy had suffered a severe concussion, multiple rib fractures, soft tissue damage, and spinal trauma. When the Gu family's men arrived at the hospital, the moment the Gus men arrived at the hospital, they split into 2 groups and smashed the front desk without a word. They even threatened to destroy the entire inpatient building if Song Enya and Song Zhenghua were allowed to stay in the hospital. And they did not show any mercy. They were definitely not joking. Gu Jinglian said that the Song family would bear all the losses. The director was in a meeting in the city. When he heard that there was a situation in the hospital, he did not think much of it. It was not until his subordinates said that the hospital was about to be smashed that he rushed back. Chapter 30:16. All he saw were men in black suits surrounding the entrance of the hospital. The huge road was filled with rows of black cars, which made the road extremely congested. There was no traffic. The passers-by were baffled and frightened by the imposing aura at the entrance. The Gu family's behavior and actions still retained the arrogant style of a gangster. In order to achieve their goals, they would do anything and even blow things up. When the hospital director rushed to the hospital, a small leader of the Gu family appeared and pointed at his face, cursing that if the hospital did not chase the Songs out, he would immediately smash the hospital. Call the police? Was there any use in calling the police? Even the police were smashed. Outside the road, the police were maintaining order by the roadside, but they ignored the Gu family. The hospital director had no choice but to run to the intensive care unit and politely ask Jiang Qiming to take them away. Jiang Qiming found it unbelievable. Song Zhenghua and Song Enya were still receiving blood transfusions, and their oxygen tubes were still connected. How could they just pack up and leave? That was too unreasonable. Hence, the Song family and the hospital got into a conflict. In the 10 minutes of this dispute, the Gu family majestically smashed the emergency room again. The emergency room was filled with rescue equipment that cost millions. The hospital director's heart ached so much that his liver twitched. He was the hospital director, but this hospital was not his. Once this loss of millions was caused, it would be his responsibility. Seeing that the Gu family was serious, the hospital did not show any mercy. They practically chased Jiang Qiming out of the hospital. Song Zhenghua and Song Enya were still lying in bed when they were chased out. Song Enya had lost too much blood and was in urgent need of a blood transfusion. Song Jianjun suggested that they go to the hospital in Zhengku. This hospital was backed by Zhengku. No matter how powerful Gu Jinglian was, he would not go so far as to smash that hospital. Jiang Qiming was also anxious. In a desperate situation, she tried anything. Hence, Song Jianjun used his connections to call for a car and immediately transferred them to the hospital. By the time they were transferred to the hospital, it was already night. The Gu family did not come looking for trouble. It was so thrilling that Jiang Qiming, who was exhausted and disheveled, fell asleep on the chair in the ward. Song Jianjun was worried that there would be another accident, so he sent someone to guard the hospital and went back. That night was peaceful. Early the next morning, when Gu Jinglian found out that Song Jianjun had arranged for Jiang Qiming to be transferred to this hospital, the Gu family came knocking on his door with great force. Crackle! The entire foyer had been smashed up by the Gu family's people. Jiang Qiming was still drowsy when she heard a nurse running into the ward in a panic. Song Zhenghua was in the same ward as Song Enya. She walked over and pulled out the needles for blood and 4 drips without a word. Jiang Qiming still did not know what was going on. When she saw her mother pulling out the needle, she rushed forward anxiously and questioned her why she was doing this. The nurse said angrily, "Someone is smashing up the hospital. It said that the Gu family sent someone here, saying that they want our hospital to chase you out. Otherwise, I'll smash the entire hospital." He dares. This hospital was backed by the central government. How dare he smash it? Did Gu Jinglian eat a bear's heart and leopard's guts? Had the Gu family's power reached such an extent? Impossible. Chapter 30:17. With Song Jianjun's support, Jiang Qiming asked, "Do you know who's lying on this bed?" The nurse glanced at Song Zhenghua and said angrily, "I know. It's written on the nameplate, Song Zhenghua." "Then, do you know who arranged for us to stay in this hospital?" "It's Chief Song." "Since you know, the hospital has already reported to Chief Song. I did this because Chief Song instructed me to do so," the nurse said confidently. Jiang Qiming was shocked when she heard this. "What? We've already called Chief Song. Chief Song has also approved of this decision." After a pause, the nurse said nervously, "Can you not make things difficult for us? I heard that the hospital you were in yesterday was smashed by the Gu family. They destroyed several million worth of equipment. Everyone in the hospital is saying that you're a jinx. Wherever you go, the Gu family will destroy everything. No hospital will dare to take you in anymore." Jiang Qiming was stunned for a long time. When the nurse continued to pull, she immediately stopped her. "My daughter is still in critical condition. She's still receiving a blood transfusion. You can't pull it out. Chief Song has already spoken. The director can't just stand by and watch the hospital be smashed into a mess because of you. The hospital is a place to save the dying and heal the injured. How can we just stand by and watch people die? You don't understand." However, the nurse was a snob. With the hospital's support, she ignored Jiang Qiming's objections and called over a few male doctors. Together, they pushed the bed out of the hospital. When the Gu family saw that they had been chased out, they immediately retreated. Jiang Qiming was furious. This Gu Jinglian was forcing her into a corner. She called Song Jianjun. On the other end, the latter said helplessly that he had no choice but to send a car to send Song Zhenghua and Song Enya home. Jiang Qiming originally thought that this was the end of Gu Jinglian. She did not expect that with Gu Jinglian's character, he would definitely not stop once he was angered to the point of death. This man had always returned kindness tenfold and enmity 100-fold. If he was displeased, he would return it 100 times, 1,000 times over. As soon as the car arrived at the entrance, Jiang Qiming didn't have time to send Song Yunxian home before she saw cars from the prosecutor's office parked in front of the Song family's gate. Jiang Qiming had met him once before and greeted him at a dinner party. He was Shen Yanfei from the capital's Discipline Inspection Commission. Her mind went blank. She was so frightened that she immediately walked forward and asked, "Chief Shen, what are you?" "Mrs. Song, I received an anonymous report that Mr. Song was a pervert. We're here to understand the situation." Were they going to raid the Song family? Jiang Qiming laughed in anger and questioned, "Who reported the corruption?" Chapter 30:18. Jiang Qiming could not stop them at all. Once Shen Yanfei gave the order, the subordinates around him immediately understood and rushed into the courtyard in a single file. "Shen Yanfei!" Jiang Qiming rushed forward and grabbed his arm, shouting at the top of her lungs, "You can't do this!" Shen Yanfei said in a neutral tone, "Mrs. Song, please open the door and cooperate with our investigation." Jiang Qiming was so angry that her lips trembled. With a livid face, she said, "Zhenghua and Enya are seriously injured now. Shen Yanfei, Zhenghua used to take care of you so much and supported you in your career. Now you're finally on a meteoric rise. Now that you've turned around, you're going to turn your back on me. Don't forget. Who exactly did you rely on to climb to this position? Now that you're in a position, you're going to be ungrateful? Her every word was a gem, but Shen Yanfei was indifferent. His tone could not help but become harsher. I asked you to open the door. Why are you talking about these irrelevant things? Indeed, Mayor Song used to support me a lot. But since when did Mayor Song have so much power to promote anyone he wanted? Jiang Qiming was speechless for a moment. She had dug a hole and jumped into it herself. She was so angry that she did not pay attention to her words. Shen Yanfei looked at her coldly and said expressionlessly, "You're just trying to divert attention and avoid the investigation. Since you're so uncooperative, don't blame us for being rude." With that, he waved his hand and said to his subordinates, "Search the house properly." Yes. His subordinates immediately broke through the door. The lock on the sturdy door was broken, and a group of people rushed in. As soon as they walked in, they immediately began to search. Jiang Qiming wanted to rush in, but she was immediately restrained. The Song family's villa was not big, but it was not small either. Jiang Qiming usually did not ask about Song Jinggua's work matters, so she did not know everything about him. However, from what she knew, Song Yunxi had embezzled a portion of the public funds for artificial insemination. This sum of money had been deposited in Song Yunxi's bank account, but it disappeared later. Song Zhenghua was very nervous, so he robbed Peter to pay Paul by embezzling another portion of the public funds into this account. Hence, when Song Enya told him that the money had been used to pay for artificial insemination, he nearly had a stroke from anger. Jiang Qiming also remembered that there was a secret door in the basement that Song Zhenghua had never allowed her to approach. Once she walked to the basement and accidentally pushed open the door. When she walked in, she found that it was filled with large safes, and each of them had a combination lock. She vaguely guessed what was inside. She had a tacit understanding with Song Zhenghua, but she didn't point it out. She knew very well in her heart how the Song family was able to obtain such wealth. Jiang Qiming had always accepted it with a clear conscience and did not think about the consequences if these things were to be exposed. She could only stand at the door and watch as people kept coming in and out. For a moment her heart was in a mess. But how could she not know? With accidents happening one after another, she naturally knew who was the one behind this sudden search operation. Gu Jinglian. Him again. Chapter 30:19. Could it be that this man would not rest until he had forced the Song family into a corner? Now, however, Song Jianjun seemed to be deliberately avoiding suspicion and did not care about them. Song Zhenghua was lying unconscious in bed, and Song Enya was in danger. Who could she pin her hopes on? No, there was only utter despair. The search lasted for a full 6 hours. In the evening, the investigation came to an end. She did not know who Shen Yanfei's subordinates were, but they actually dug 3 feet into the ground of the huge villa. His subordinate came to report that they had found a lot of things and had already made a list for him to look through. Shen Yanfei walked into the living room and found a safe and a number of gold bars moved to the center of the empty space. His subordinate reported that the murals on the wall could be moved. When they were moved, they found a secret door. When the secret door was opened, they found the gold bars and cash hidden inside. In the bookcase, some of the books were hollowed out from the center, and there were a few passbooks and bank cards hidden in them. After some investigation, it was found that these accounts added up to hundreds of millions of yuan in savings. Hundreds of millions! The bank's back-end investigation found that the origin of this money was unknown. A portion of it had not been processed, so the bank immediately froze it. All these years, Song Zhenghua had been transferring his assets overseas, including several properties he had bought in America. 2 of them were in San Francisco, which were worth millions of dollars, and 3 seaside villas in Florida, which were worth tens of millions. There were also some scattered assets that had yet to be cleared. The court sent people to transfer these assets and put a seal on the villa. Song Zhenghua and Song Enya were taken to the hospital by law enforcement officers and detained. Seeing that the situation was not good, Jiang Qiming could not care about Song Enya and Song Zhenghua anymore. Taking advantage of the fact that Shen Yanfei was not paying attention, she hurriedly took a taxi and left. She found out the address of the Gu residence and went all the way there. When she reached the door, she frantically knocked on the door, begging to see Gu Jinglian. No one in the Gu family paid her any attention and did not let her in. For the whole night, she knelt in front of the Gu Jinglian's door, begging him for a look. When Uncle Fu came to report, Gu Jinglian was playing Gamoku with Xiao Bao in the study. After what had happened at Song Inya's wedding yesterday, Gu Jinglian had left a good impression on him. He knew that the man was doing this to support him. Hence, when he returned to the Gu residence, the little lad was no longer as cold to him as before. He kept addressing him as uncle, and appeared to be very close to him. Gu Jinglian, on the other hand, was particularly arrogant. He pushed his face away with a look of disdain. Baby Chu, on the other hand, did not mind and continued to circle around Gu Jinglian. He felt that this uncle was pretty good. At least he took care of him and helped him deal with those bad people who bullied him. He felt that this man was a very reliable backer. He couldn't help but fantasize that if he found his mother and set her up with his uncle, he would be able to call this uncle Dad. He had a father. In fact, Xiao Bao had already acknowledged this man in his heart. However, he had not changed the way he addressed him because he was afraid that his mother would be angry and unhappy. Still, he did not know if his mother would not acknowledge this man. Chapter 30:20. Gu Jinglian did not know what the child was thinking. He felt awkward calling him uncle, but when he saw that chubby little face, he felt that it was acceptable to call him uncle. Xiao Bao kept pestering him to play Gamoku, but Gu Jinglian did not have the patience to do so. The reason was that Gamoku was too childish. However, during this period of time, the little guy had become obsessed with this game for some reason. It was something that Uncle Fu had taught him. However, when he learned Gamoku, he discovered that this Gamoku was too simple. That was because he played against Uncle Fu. Out of 5 games, Uncle Fu would lose at least 4 games. It was not challenging at all. He kept winning, and the little guy thought that Gamoku was not difficult at all. He believed that he had extraordinary talent in Gamoku and was invincible. Therefore, he wanted to challenge Gu Jinglian. However, after just 1 game, Xiao Bao lost in less than 10 games. What the little guy did not know was that Uncle Fu had been giving in to him all this time. Uncle Fu was very good at Go. Gamoku was child's play to him. However, Gu Jinglian's Go skills were superior to his. Even a high-level national player would not be able to gain an advantage in front of Gu Jinglian, let alone a newbie like Xiao Bao. Gu Jinglian would not give in to him. To him, he had a strong desire to win. Whether it was a game or a competition, he wanted to compete for supremacy in everything. Even if the person playing chess with him was a 5-year-old child, his son, Gu Jinglian, would not give in. After 5 games, Xiao Bao did not gain any advantage. He was completely defeated by his father. His little mouth pouted and his nose wrinkled as if he was about to cry. Uncle Fu did not know whether to laugh or cry as he watched from the side. The father and son played chess together. Although Gu Jinglian looked like a mature adult, he was also very childish and willful in certain aspects. Seeing that Xiao Bao was about to cry, Uncle Fu couldn't bear it. He moved closer to Gu Jinglian and whispered in his ear, "Old master, at least give in." Gu Jinglian asked impatiently, "Why should I give in to him? You're already so old, why are you being so calculative with a child? It wasn't easy for Xiao Bao to learn Gamoku, but you killed him until he lost all his temper. That's too cruel." Gu Jinglian asked coldly, "Who's to blame for his stupidity?" Uncle Fu cleared his throat and said, "Ahem. Master, this is your son. Gu Jinglian. You gave birth to such a stupid child." Uncle Fu continued to remind him, "But if Xiao Bao is properly trained, he might become smarter." Xiao Bao eavesdropped on them. He put his hands on his hips and said aggrievedly, "I'm not stupid." Gu Jinglian frowned and said, "Do you still want to continue? I'm not playing anymore." Xiao Bao pushed the chessboard dejectedly and said unhappily, "I'm not playing anymore. This game isn't fun." He was stupid, but he still had the cheek to blame the game for not being fun. Gu Jinglian was disgusted. However, Xiao Bao was unwilling to give up. He thought that if he couldn't beat Gu Jinglian in Gamoku, what about the other games? He didn't believe that he couldn't beat him in any game. Xiao Bao crossed his arms and thought hard. Suddenly, he thought of something. His eyes lit up and he said to Gu Jinglian, "Let's play aeroplane chess." I'm not free. Get lost. Gu Jinglian's words were concise and to the point, his gaze cold. Aeroplane chess. He, the head of the Gu family, was actually playing aeroplane chess with a 5-year-old child. Chapter 30:21. When Xiao Bao heard this, he said smugly, "Is it because you know you can't beat me so you don't dare to play with me?" This was clearly a goading tactic. Uncle Fu thought to himself in a cold sweat. Master would definitely not fall for such a goading tactic. However, he saw Gu Jinglian's contemptuous expression. He slammed the table and said, "Bullsh *T. You think I can't beat you?" Xiao Bao immediately said, "Then I'll bring the chessboard over. Beat me again if you can." Gu Jinglian said coldly, "Bring it on. Don't cry if you lose." "I won't cry." As Xiao Bao said this, he immediately went back to his room to bring back the aeroplane chess that Uncle Fu had bought for him. Aeroplane chess was made up of 4 colors. There was a picture of an airplane on it, and it could be played by up to 4 people. There was a die in aeroplane chess. When the die was shaken, the number of heads on the die would determine the number of steps one could take until one reached the end point. However, at the beginning, the plane could only leave the starting point and take off when one rolled a 6. The number of steps one could take to reach the end point had to be exactly right in order to win. It was a chess game that relied heavily on luck. Xiao Bao took it over excitedly. He and Gu Jinglian each took a color and started playing. Gu Jinglian familiarized himself with the rules of the game and found it novel. When he saw that it was a dice game, he couldn't bear to see it. Was this little brat sure he wanted to play a dice game with him? Uncle Fu saw this from the side and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Gu Jinglian had spent most of his childhood in casinos. Whenever it involved gambling, whether it was pai gao, mahjong, or especially dice, he could roll as many times as he wanted. Uncle Fu thought that Gu Jinglian would definitely go easy on him. If Xiao Bao lost and cried, he wouldn't be able to bear it, right? Who would have thought that Gu Jinglian would take such a small game so seriously? The moment he came up, he threw a 6. Once he threw a 6, he could continue. Gu Jinglian threw 4 sixes in a row, and 4 planes took off. When he saw Baby Chu looking like he was about to cry, he casually threw a number. When Xiao Bao saw that it was finally his turn, he solemnly fiddled with the dice in his palm for a long time. When it landed on the table, it was a 4. His face was filled with despair. He stared at Gu Jinglian as he threw 2 sixes and walked a few steps. He felt strange in his heart. How could he casually throw a 6, but he only took off 1 plane after half a day? Xiao Bao was still a little clever. When it was his turn again, he took the dice and began to study it. No matter how he looked at it, there was no problem. He threw the dice again and finally threw a 6. He excitedly took off 1 plane and walked a few more steps. In the next round, Gu Jinglian's plane flew over and sent his plane back to the starting point. Xiao Bao looked like he had nothing left to live for. Halfway through the game, he overturned the chessboard and was about to cry. "I'm not playing anymore." Gu Jinglian frowned suspiciously. "What's wrong? I feel that you're being shameless." Xiao Bao said truthfully, "Why can't you always throw a 6 but I can't?" Gu Jinglian said, "I can throw as many as I want. You're destined to lose if you play dice with me." "You're lying." Xiao Bao did not believe him. "Throwing dice depends on luck." "I'm not lying to you." "Okay, then throw a 4 for me to see." As soon as he finished speaking, Gu Jinglian lazily rested his chin on his hand and casually picked up the dice. He spun it on the table and landed with a 4. Chapter 30:22. Xiao Bao was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. It was unbelievable. It was like magic. Xiao Bao felt that it was amazing, but he was still skeptical. He suddenly reached out and grabbed Gu Jinglian's large hand to examine it carefully. He didn't miss a single pattern, but after a careful examination, he didn't find anything strange. For a moment, his mind was full of question marks. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Xiao Bao said again, "I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Try throwing another one." Uncle Fu teased him. "How many dice do you want this time?" "1. Gu Jinglian didn't hesitate at all and threw the dice. The dice spun on the table for a long time before finally landing with 1 point facing up. 3. Gu Jinglian threw again and accurately hit 3 points. "That's weird." Xiao Bao scratched his head in confusion. He didn't expect Gu Jinglian to do this. That was exactly what he was doing. Xiaobao suddenly asked curiously, "Then if you throw 2 dice, can you get the same number?" Gu Jinglian said, "Bring me 2 dice." Uncle Fu immediately rummaged through the cabinets and found 2 dice for him. Together with the one in his hand, there were 3 dice in total. Uncle Fu then brought over a dice cup. Gu Jinglian threw the 3 dice into the cup and pinched the dice cup between his 2 slender fingers. He casually played with the dice cup in his hands and suddenly placed it upside down on the table. His handsome eyebrows raised slightly. Xiaobao glanced at him and saw that he was motioning for him to open the dice cup. Thus, he curiously reached out his small hand and opened the dice cup. He was surprised to find that all 3 dice were exactly 1 point. He was even more bewildered. "Uncle, you're amazing. I'm convinced." Gu Jinglian was flattered by his flattery and felt a little smug. He snorted coldly and said, "It's just a small trick. Can you teach me how to play?" Xiaobao clasped his little fists, his eyes full of yearning. He felt that Gu Jinglian's skill was simply too amazing. It was too cool. He could throw as many as he wanted. Could he be one of the legendary mysterious magicians? Gu Jinglian said, "Why should I teach you? You're so stupid, you won't be able to learn it. I will learn with an open mind. I'll definitely train hard. No matter how difficult it is, I will definitely learn it." Xiaobao's eyes were filled with admiration, which made Gu Jinglian feel a little better. He even wanted to show off his card skills in front of this little guy, so that this little guy would worship him even more and worship him like a god. Uncle Fu cast a sidelong glance at Gu Jinglian. He was a little disgusted. He didn't expect that old master would have such a childish side. He actually took the little guy seriously. However, this kind of master was a little cute. Uncle Fu was looking at them with gratification. Outside the door, a subordinate came to report that Jiang Qiming was kneeling at the door. They couldn't chase her away and she still had no intention of leaving. Will something happen to her? After all, she's at the Gu family's doorstep. It'll be bad luck if something happens to her. What do you mean? Jiang Qiming is clamoring to see old master. Uncle Fu, do you think we should let old master take a look at her personally? Uncle Fu walked in front of Gu Jinglian and told him about the matter. Gu Jinglian said coldly, "Do I have to do this personally? If she refuses to leave, break her legs." Chapter 30-23. Gu Jinglian pursed his lips impatiently. He then stood up and said to Xiaobao, "Be good and wait for me." "Okay." Xiaobao watched curiously as Gu Jinglian and Uncle Fu left. Feeling puzzled, he followed behind them. Gu Jinglian and Uncle Fu only realized that it was raining heavily when they reached the door. Jiang Qiming knelt motionlessly at the door. The pouring rain hit her body and soaked her clothes. Her thin clothes stuck to her body, making her look sickly and lifeless. She had not had a good night's sleep for 2 days and 2 nights. Moreover, such a huge incident had happened in the Song family. She was utterly defeated. Jiang Qiming heard footsteps and immediately looked up. Once she saw that it was Gu Jinglian, a flattering smile immediately appeared on her face. "Young Master Gu, you're finally willing to see me." Gu Jinglian frowned in disgust at her sorry state and said coldly, "What are you doing? Young Master Gu, I'm begging you. Please let the Song family off. I don't know what Enya did to offend you. However, if Enya has really offended you in any way, I'll kowtow to you on her behalf and apologize to you since she's still young and immature. But I beg you to let the Song family off. Zhenghua is seriously injured and Enya is half dead. Isn't this punishment enough?" Gu Jinglian said expressionlessly, "Don't say such nonsense. Get lost or I'll break your legs." With that he turned to leave. Jiang Qiming turned pale with fright and immediately pounced on him. She hugged his slender legs and refused to let go. Gu Jinglian's gaze was furious. He turned around and said coldly, "Let go. Young Master Gu, I'm begging you. The Song family is finished. If this is punishment, then isn't it enough? How are you going to pressure the Song family? Do you really want to force the Song family into a dead end before you stop?" Jiang Qiming broke down and cried hysterically, "Let people off whenever possible, right? Young Master Gu, let the Song family off. Get lost." Gu Jinglian kicked her away. Jiang Qiming flew out like a paper kite with a broken string. She hit the door and fell on the steps. That kick happened to land on her chest. She clutched her chest and coughed pathetically as if she was going to cough her lungs out. Gu said contemptuously, "I can let the Song family off, but you have to die. How about that?" "What? Didn't you say that you wanted to apologize on behalf of your daughter?" Gu Jinglian said expressionlessly. "Then pay with your life." When Jiang Qiming heard this, her eyes widened as she looked at him in disbelief. She could not believe that there was such a cruel man in this world. "Gu, don't you go too far." As Jiang Qiming spoke, she suddenly saw a thin figure hiding at the door not far away. Chapter 30-24. From now on we'll stay out of each other's business. If you don't agree, then I'll take this child down with me. Jiang Qiming had obviously chosen to do this because she was in despair. On the way here, she had specially bought a dagger. If Gu Jinglian was determined to kill her, then she didn't mind taking Gu Jinglian down with her. She had originally prepared this dagger for Gu Jinglian. However, when she saw this child, she recognized him at a glance. This was the child that Gu Jinglian held in his arms at the wedding. She realized that Gu Jinglian treated this child differently. Although this child kept calling him uncle, she realized that Gu Jinglian doted on this boy very much. She couldn't help but wonder how this child was related to Gu Jinglian. Could he be an illegitimate child? Gu Jinglian had never married. Many socialites in the capital yearned for Gu Jinglian's young, handsome and high status. However, they were also wary of Gu Jinglian's unpredictable temperament. There were very few families that were on good terms with the Gu family. Most of them coveted Gu Jinglian's ruthless methods and were in awe of him. However, Gu Jinglian had a woman before. Therefore, Jiang Qiming suspected that this child was Gu Jinglian's illegitimate child. Xiao Bao was quite frightened by this sudden battle. His entire body froze and he didn't dare to move. With the cold dagger pressed against his neck, he didn't even dare to make a sound as he looked at Gu Jinglian anxiously. However, for some reason, even though he was in imminent danger, he still wasn't too nervous. He subconsciously believed that this insufferably arrogant man would never allow him to be in danger. This was probably trust. He believed that this man wouldn't let him be in danger. When Gu Jinglian saw that Xiao Bao had fallen into Jiang Qiming's hands, his eyes finally regained some focus and a trace of nervousness appeared. He reprimanded Uncle Fu and said, "Why is he here?" Uncle Fu was also at a loss. "Old master, I don't know either. This guy probably followed us out of curiosity." Gu Jinglian was a little anxious. This guy always made him worry. The subordinates at the side were also stunned and did not dare to act rashly. They knew very well that this child was not ordinary to Gu Jinglian. They were afraid that Jiang Qiming would really hurt the child, so they stood rooted to the ground and waited for orders. He raged, "Jiang Qiming, don't test my limits. Let him go." Bottom line. So the great young Master Gu also has a bottom line? Jiang Qiming was even more certain that this child had a special place in his heart. She tightened her grip on the child and glared at him. "As long as you let the Song family off, I won't make things difficult for this child. Are you negotiating with me?" Gu Jinglian sneered. "What right do you have to bargain with me? If you don't want to die a horrible death, let the child go." Uncle Fu was frightened when he heard this. He immediately tugged at Gu Jinglian's sleeve and said gloomily, "Old master, this child is still in someone's hands. You've angered Jiang Qiming by saying these words. Aren't you afraid that she will really die together with Xiao Bao in a fit of anger?" "She wouldn't dare," Gu Jinglian said fiercely. "If she dares to touch a single strand of hair on his head, I'll cut off her flesh piece by piece." Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. No one doubted that Gu Jinglian's words were just a threat. Given his character, if he dared to say such a thing, he would dare to do it. Song Inya was a classic example. Chapter 30-25. Hence, the little one said to Jiang Qiming sympathetically, "Auntie, can you let me go? Otherwise, you'll really be in trouble." Jiang Qiming was speechless. Xiao Bao seemed to pity her and said, "This uncle not only kills people without batting an eyelid, but his methods are also very terrifying. Don't misunderstand. I have nothing to do with him and I'm not that important to him. Don't take things too hard and use me to threaten him. It's useless. You'll only die a worse death." Uncle Fu was confused. He didn't know how this little one came up with But he actually managed to scare Jiang Qiming into a daze. He even managed to make this tense situation disappear. Jiang Qiming screamed. "Shut up," Gu Jinglian said. "Jiang Qiming, do you think you can threaten me with this child? I'll give you 3 seconds to let him go." "Gu Jinglian, do you think I'll believe your nonsense again? Or else?" Gu Jinglian interrupted her. "1. You? 2. Jiang Qiming was inexplicably frightened and stumbled backward. Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows and counted to 3. There was a bang and a gunshot. A bullet pierced through the air and pierced through her shoulder. Ah! Jiang Qiming was in so much pain that she subconsciously loosened her grip and the dagger fell to the ground. Xiaobao immediately broke free from her grip and jumped down from her arms. He didn't forget to stomp on her foot before nimbly running toward Gu Jinglian. Behind him, Jiang Qiming immediately got up, grabbed the dagger on the ground and stabbed it toward Xiaobao's back. Uncle Fu was so shocked that he opened his mouth. Before he could exclaim, Gu Jinglian suddenly rushed forward, hugged Xiaobao in his arms, and threw a clean flying kick. However, Jiang Qiming held the dagger and fiercely swung it at him. In the blink of an eye, Gu Jinglian kicked Jiang Qiming's shoulder hard and sent her flying. Gu Jinglian's arm was caught off guard as he was protecting Xiaobao, and was cut by her dagger. Gu Jinglian didn't notice that he was injured, but Xiaobao's sharp eyes noticed that his clothes were stained with blood and torn. He seemed to be injured. He said fearfully, "Uncle, you're injured." He felt guilty and worried at the same time. Uncle Fu rushed over and took the child from Gu Jinglian. He was also shocked when he noticed the abnormality in his arm. "Old master, you're injured. Let me take a look." "Where are you injured?" Gu Jinglian would never put himself in danger easily, but this was the first time in his life that he was injured because of this child. Gu Jinglian pushed him away and turned to look at Jiang Qiming. He said coldly, "You're courting death." After saying that, he walked forward, grabbed her by the throat and lifted her up. Even though his arm was injured, he was still very strong. Jiang Qiming's feet were suspended in the air. Her neck was in his hand, and the sound of her joints dislocating kept coming out. She hugged his arm tightly and kicked her legs. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her entire face was flushed red. She was almost suffocating. No, don't kill." Jiang Qiming said a few words with difficulty, her eyes filled with pain and despair. Gu Jinglian was indifferent and tightened his grip on her throat. Xiaobao saw this scene and was frightened. He immediately said, "Uncle, stop." Chapter 30:26. As Xiaobao spoke, he glanced at Jiang Qiming, who was lying on the ground in a sorry state. He could not bear to see her like this. She looks so pitiful. Furthermore, if you kill someone, it will only dirty your hands. Gu Jinglian frowned. He could not help but wonder if this little guy was his biological son. Why was he so soft-hearted? Had he forgotten that it was this pitiful woman who had used her dirty hand to strangle his neck and even pressed a dagger against his neck? Uncle Fu also said, "Old master, don't dirty your hands. Leave this kind of person to me." Then he whispered into Gu Jinglian's ear, "You have to be more careful in front of the child. Otherwise you will scare the child. Xiaobao is only 5 years old." Gu Jinglian felt that it made sense. He nodded slightly and said, "I'll leave it to you." Uncle Fu nodded. Gu Jinglian carried Xiaobao and returned to the room. After the thrilling scene just now, the two of them were in a sorry state. They were drenched from head to toe. Just as Gu Jinglian returned to the room, Xiaobao hurriedly left his arms and started rummaging through the cabinets. "What are you looking for?" Xiaobao could not be bothered to speak. Finally, he found a first aid kit in the cabinet. He was observant. A few days ago, Uncle Fu had accidentally injured his finger and used a band-aid, so he put the first aid kit here. He carried the first aid kit to Gu Jinglian and said carefully, "Uncle, your arm is injured. Let me help you apply the medicine." Gu Jinglian looked at him suspiciously. Why was this guy trying to curry favor for no reason? He said, "There's no need. I can do it myself." "You can't bandage it as well as I can," Xiaobao said as he pushed him to sit on the sofa. He emphasized, "You just have to sit down. Leave the rest to me." Gu Jinglian looked at him with disdain and questioned, "Can you do it?" "Of course. Mother often gets injured, so I'm the one who takes care of her wounds." Uncle, you have to believe in my ability. As he spoke, Xiaobao rolled up Gu Jinglian's sleeve. There was a knife wound on his arm. Fortunately, the wound was not deep and did not even require stitches. He only needed to clean the wound and bandage it to stop the bleeding. Gu Jinglian simply leaned against the sofa and closed his eyes, leaving the little guy to his own devices. Xiaobao opened the first aid kit and rolled up his sleeves. Then, he used a pair of tweezers to carefully pick up an alcohol swab and wanted to apply it to his wound. Unexpectedly, his hand was too small, and the tweezers were a little too big. Unexpectedly, the alcohol cotton was not clamped, and the sharp tip of the tweezers poked the wound. Gu Jinglian. He abruptly opened his eyes and glared fiercely at little treasure. What's going on? Even if it was alcohol, it shouldn't be so painful. Xiaobao felt a little guilty and retracted the tweezers. Fortunately, Gu Jinglian did not see it. He laughed and said, "Uncle, so you're afraid of pain too?" Gu Jinglian's lips twitched and he snorted coldly. How is that possible? He frowned and was suspicious again. If you don't know how to do it, I'll do it myself. I didn't do well just now. It's all your fault for moving around. Gu Jinglian. His face was full of question marks. When did he move around? This kid was blaming others for his own incompetence. Chapter 30:27. Gu Jinglian tolerated it and was rather patient. Xiaobao was more attentive this time. He carefully cleaned his wound, then applied some medicine and bandaged it with gauze. It's done. Xiaobao was elated. Gu Jinglian opened his eyes and saw that his arm was wrapped very thickly with gauze. After that, he even tied a bow. It was very girlish. Such a thick bandage made people think that his arm was broken. Gu Jinglian's face was ashen. Is this what you mean by having enough experience? Is there a problem? Gu Jinglian said coldly. I only scratched the skin. My bones are not broken. I was afraid that your wound would hurt if it hit something hard like the corner of a table. It won't hurt if the bandage is thicker. Xiaobao explained very considerately. Gu Jinglian was speechless again. When Uncle Fu walked in and saw Gu Jinglian's arm wrapped like a dumpling, his face immediately changed colors. He shriveled for a long time and then laughed loudly without giving face. Old master, is your arm broken? No. Gu Jinglian was even angrier. If you laugh again, I'll pull out your tongue. Oh. Uncle Fu was so frightened that he quickly covered his mouth and stopped laughing. Xiaobao was a little frustrated. His little face wrinkled and he asked sadly, Is my bandage that ugly? Humph, what do you think? Gu Jinglian kicked his butt. Go to sleep. Humph. A dog biting a green bean cake. You don't know how to be kind. Xiaobao muttered as he went back to his room. Gu Jinglian and Uncle Fu looked at each other and suddenly asked tacitly, What's a green bean cake? Uncle Fu asked, Old master, do you need me to bandage it again? No need. Gu Jinglian said awkwardly. It's troublesome. With that, he got up and returned to his room. Uncle Fu snickered behind his back. This old master really didn't mean what he said. How was it that he was afraid of trouble? It was that he couldn't bear to tear it down. Even though he disliked it, it was still his own son who had bandaged his wound. The next day, the news reported the news of Song Jinggua's downfall. The disciplinary committee found a lot of cash and gold bars of unknown origin in the Song residence. They even found out that Song Jinggua had bought overseas. In addition, Song Yunqi was also taken away for investigation. It was said that Song Jianjun was spared because he was the one who exposed Song Jinggua's other hidden assets. This was clearly an act of abandoning the pawn to save the general, to save one's own life. Once this news was announced, the whole city was shocked. Song Jinggua was the mayor of Beijing. In front of the public, he had always presented himself as a clean and honest man. However, no one would have thought that he had embezzled such a large amount of gray assets. After the final liquidation by the disciplinary commission, the total amount was more than 1 billion. Among them, there was also Song Jinggua's unknown investment funds. In addition, Jiang Qiming was also taken away for investigation. This matter caused a huge uproar and even alarmed the higher-ups. Song Jinggua caused a series of butterfly effects. It was said that following his connections, other people were also uprooted. Beijing's government experienced a big reshuffle overnight. Another report also caught the attention of the public. Chapter 30:28. It was rumored that the Song family had offended the Gu family, and that the Gu family was the one behind all this. However, there were also people who said that the Gu family had only collected relevant evidence. If Song Zhenghua had not done such a thing, the Gu family would not have made up something out of nothing to deal with the Song family. Song Zhenghua's case was still under investigation, and his assets had been seized. As for his trial, it would be held in public at another date. Song Zhenghua could never have imagined that because of his daughter, his career would come to an end like this. He had failed miserably. What he didn't expect even more was that what awaited him was a death sentence with a reprieve. Of course, this was all in the future. During this period of time, Chu Ho had been actively rehabilitating. Under Uncle Fu's meticulous care, her body was getting better, and her complexion had returned to normal. Hence, when she asked to see Xiao Bao again, Uncle Fu did not refuse. In the afternoon when Xiao Bao came home from kindergarten, Uncle Fu hugged him and said mysteriously, "Xiao Bao, Uncle Fu will take you to see someone. Okay?" Xiao Bao was curious. "Who is it?" "Don't worry, you'll know when you see him later." Uncle Fu carried Xiao Bao and walked into Chu Ho's room. When he opened the door, Xiao Bao was still confused. However, when he followed Uncle Fu's line of sight and saw Chu Ho standing in the room, wearing a white shirt and looking uneasy, he was stunned. He was so shocked that he could not speak. Chu Ho was originally calm as she waited anxiously. When Uncle Fu said that he would bring Xiao Bao over, she waited patiently in the room. She was afraid that her reunion with Xiao Bao would be obstructed by Gu Jinglian. However, she did not expect that Gu Jinglian would not interfere, which surprised her. When she saw Xiao Bao, Chu Ho's eyes reddened. A warm smile immediately appeared on her originally stern face. She immediately walked over and held Xiao Bao's face, looking left and right. Originally, Xiao Bao was very thin, not tall, and there was not much flesh on his face. However, how long had it been? His face had become chubby, and he had grown a lot taller. Chu Ho suddenly had mixed feelings. She hugged him tightly, her eyelashes wet with tears. "Xiao Bao." Chu Ho's throat was choked and her voice was a little hoarse. Xiao Bao reacted belatedly. When he first saw her, he thought that he was dreaming. It was only when Chu Ho hugged him tightly and felt the real touch and the warmth of her body that he realized that this was not a dream. This was really happening. Finally, he was reunited with her. His mother was alive and kicking. His mother really existed in reality and not in a dream. No matter how hard he tried, he could not catch up with her. "Mom!" Xiao Bao was so emotional that he burst into tears. He cried and hugged Chu Ho, crying until the sky fell and the earth cracked. Xiao Bao thought that he would never see Mom again in this lifetime. Xiao Bao cried sadly, and Chu Ho's heart ached even more. She took him from Uncle Fu's arms and hugged him, kissing his forehead repeatedly. "Mom missed you too." Sup. "Mom, why did you only find Xiao Bao now?" Xiao Bao felt wronged and disdainful. "Mom is so stupid. So stupid, so stupid." When Uncle Fu saw this scene, he couldn't help but be moved. The corners of his eyes were a little wet, and he felt a little touched. Chapter 30:29. Even though Xiao Bao rarely mentioned Chu Ho during this period of time, he knew that the little guy was meticulous. Even though he didn't say it out loud, he was always thinking about Chu Ho in his heart. Hence, he was happy to nurse Chu Ho back to health. He hoped that she could recover quickly so that she could appear in front of the little guy in good health. It would be a surprise for the little guy. To Xiao Bao, this surprise was both surprising and delightful. He could tell that when he saw Chu Ho, he was so emotional that he almost fainted from crying. Uncle Fu was considerate. He quietly left the room and closed the door, giving the mother and son some space. Chu Ho wiped away Xiao Bao's tears and said, "Don't cry, okay? Didn't Mommy find you?" Humph. Xiao Bao was still a little angry. However, he couldn't hold it in for long. In the blink of an eye, he smiled warmly again. Chu Ho pinched his face affectionately and said to him, "Xiao Bao, Mommy will take you away from here, okay?" When Xiao Bao heard this, he was startled. He didn't immediately nod in agreement. Instead, he grabbed her collar uneasily and said hesitantly, "Mommy, Xiao Bao has a question to ask you." Chu Ho paused for a moment and said, "Okay, go ahead." She vaguely realized that what he was going to ask might be a tricky question. Xiaobao asked Mommy before where Daddy was, but Mommy said that the grass on Daddy's grave was taller than me. But Xiaobao found Daddy. Xiaobao blushed and said, Mommy said that before. Was she lying to Xiaobao? Chuho held her breath and didn't answer immediately, because she didn't know how to answer this question. Xiaobao asked doubtfully, Mommy, Xiaobao has a daddy, right? His name is Gu Jinglian, right? Xiaobao. Must Mommy leave? When Xiaobao thought about leaving with her, he was afraid that he would never see that handsome and bad uncle again, and his mood became inexplicably complicated. Thus he probed carefully. Can't Mom stay? With his father, Xiaobao would have a mother and a father. Mommy won't be alone anymore. Chuho did not expect him to make such a request. For a moment he did not know how to respond. Xiaobao, don't you like Mommy anymore? I do. Xiaobao loves Mommy the most. Just as Xiaobao finished speaking, he hesitated for a moment. He changed the topic and said softly, but Xiaobao likes Uncle too. Although that uncle looks fierce like a big iceberg and doesn't seem easy to get close to, Xiaobao can feel that he likes Xiaobao too and treats Xiaobao very well. A few days ago, Uncle even taught me a lesson. Bad guys? Baby Chu immediately told her everything that had happened after he was kidnapped by the two men sent by Song Enya, including his encounter with Gu Jinglian, as well as what had happened in the Gu family during this period of time. He told her everything, big and small. Chuho was a little stunned when she heard this. Although she was confused and couldn't make heads or tails of it, there was one thing that Xiaobao emphasized. Gu Jinglian treated him very well. Although he would sometimes threaten him with scary words like, I'll break your legs, Xiaobao could see how much he doted on him. Chapter 30:30. Quote, at the end of the day, blood ties are a very strange thing. It could bind two people together tightly, and it was the most intimate bond. But it can also mercilessly create an insurmountable gap between them. When I was young, I used to be glad that I had a brother like Dongyu who doted on me. I used to think that I was the happiest girl in the world. When I grew up, I hated that the man I loved so much that I couldn't extricate myself from had the same blood flowing in his veins. Along the way, along the way, along the way, along the way, along the way. From ignorant feelings to immature feelings, to a strong desire to be together forever, until we were forcibly separated by the world. How far is forever? In a single thought, eternity is eternal. One wrong thought and every step will lead to death. Dongyu, do you know that even though the world is so big, I have nowhere to go and no one to rely on? Whether it's God or anyone else, who can explain to me what love is? If no one can explain it clearly, then why can't I fall in love with Dongyu? This is a question that I still can't solve after leaving home for so long. For so many years I've been searching for a balance between love and Dongyu, until I received the sudden news of my marriage. Shachuan, let me tell you a piece of good news. Your brother is getting married. When are you coming back for a gathering? Over the phone, my father's voice sounded weathered and uneasy. He chose his words carefully. Come home. Everyone misses you. Your mother and I, and your brother. Everyone misses you. At that moment my breathing stopped. It was really like a boom. My mind went blank, and there was nothing left. This news, which made the whole family immerse in joy, suddenly threw me into eternal hell. Holding the receiver tightly, I was silent for a long time. Then I tried my best to suppress my trembling voice and said calmly, okay? After hanging up the call, I realized that the back of my hand was already sweaty. Father said, come home. But that was home, and yet it wasn't home. I never thought that reality would be so cruel. It was so cruel that one look at heaven and one look at hell. I used to think of him as my entire world, but I didn't expect this warm world to suddenly collapse like a cloud. And it came so suddenly. The next day, I booked a flight back to China. I knew that returning home this time was definitely not a wise choice. After drifting alone in a foreign country for a few years, I waited for such news. I thought that even if I had given up, I should be more thorough. Let me see him with my own eyes. If he is really happy, then I should try to let go of this unforgettable relationship. The moment I got off the plane, I felt a lump in my throat. Looking at the crowd in front of me, I felt a stabbing pain in my heart and tears welled up in my eyes. I walked through the crowd with great difficulty, but my footsteps were very slow. Every step I took I would stop, and from time to time I would brush past strangers. I still remember that 8 years ago, when I left this city with a heart filled with despair, it was the same scene. These people pass by my world. I don't know their stories, and they don't understand my thoughts. Chapter 30-31. Now that I've set foot on this land again, the city seems to have changed a lot. The airport has been rebuilt, the interior decoration is new, and it looks very stylish. The thick Beijing accent of my hometown filled my ears. It's been a long time since I last heard it, and at the same time I feel very warm in my heart. I'm back. After 8 years I'm stepping on this land again. But in my heart there's a bit of nervousness, but more there's a deep sadness in my heart. When I left back then I felt that the future was unfamiliar. But now that I've set foot on this land I don't feel close. There's a sense of timidity when I'm close to home. Mother has been waiting at the airport for a long time, and she arrived early. She must have specially dressed up after knowing that I'm coming back. After 8 years, when the mother and daughter met again, they didn't hug each other warmly like normal people. They just stood there quietly and looked at each other. There was estrangement in their eyes. I think she must have sadly discovered a flash of indifference in my eyes. From her face, it's not hard to see how much she wants to go forward and hug me tightly. She wants to tell me how much she missed me in the past 8 years as a mother. How she wanted to tell me how worried my family had been about me since I had been away for so long. Maybe she regretted what she did 8 years ago, I thought. But all the words are stuck in my throat under my cold gaze. There are thousands of words, but I can't open my mouth. Mom, I'm back. Amidst the noise, I smiled and broke the awkward silence between us. Mother came back to her senses and forced a smile. She chuckled and muttered, "It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back." Then she felt a bit awkward. As if to ease the awkwardness, she hurried forward to help me carry my luggage. Out of the corner of my eye, I instinctively dodged her hand. My mother was in a daze, and her hand froze in mid-air. "Mom, I'll do it myself." As I said that, there was no change in my expression. I knew that my cold gaze must have made my mother's heart ache a little, because I saw a flash of pain on her face. I suddenly realized that these 8 years, which was neither a long nor short period of time, seemed to be like a great flood that washed away the dependence and connection between mother and daughter. "Xiaochuan, do you still hate me? 8 years ago, I had no choice but to send you out of the country. I'm doing this for your own good." A smile appeared on my face, but I said nothing. After a long while I sighed. I know, so you really don't have to explain so much." She gave me another long look. "Xiaochuan, is the luggage heavy? Let Mom do it for you." Her mother's voice was very soft and even trembled slightly. She said carefully, "Let me carry it for you. Xiaochuan, I'll carry your luggage for you, okay?" I was stunned. When I looked up, I saw her frowning slightly. She seemed a little humble now. It was a world of difference from when she had arrogantly chased me out of the country. I pursed my lips and nodded silently, allowing my mother to take the luggage from me. Chapter 30-32. This time I didn't avoid it. There was some comfort in my mother's eyes. "The city has changed a lot in the years you've been away. Our family has moved too. The piece of land we used to live in has been taken over by the government. When he heard that you were coming back, your father was overjoyed. He didn't sleep well last night. He tossed and turned nervously. He kept saying that he was waiting for you to come back today so that he could cook for you. Look, he bought fresh vegetables early in the morning. He's probably still busy at home." Sitting in the taxi, Mother Lan smiled and chattered. Gradually, she let go of her worries. I smiled but didn't say anything. My gaze was indifferent through the car window. "It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back." As my mother spoke in the rearview mirror, the corners of her eyes couldn't help but moisten. However, she secretly wiped away the tears with her fingertips, not wanting me to see. "Mom!" I silently looked out the window at the unfamiliar street. My eyelids drooped slightly as I interrupted her indifferently. I asked hesitantly, "Is he all right?" She knew who I was talking about. Hence, she fell silent and the smile on her face gradually faded. "Don't you? He has always been thinking about you." I vaguely remember that not long after I was born, the first word I could say was brother. The first name I said when I was learning to speak was also his name. Dongyu for as long as I could remember. The thing that left the deepest impression on me wasn't my mother's gentle whispers, nor my father's broad shoulders, but his warm arms. My name was Yin Xiachuan. I was born on the hottest day of summer. His name was Yin Dongyu. He was born during the coldest time of winter. He was my brother, 3 years older than me. When I was young, my parents were busy with work and the family of 4 rarely spent time together. When I was born, my mother's heart ached for me, and she insisted on giving birth to me. In order to avoid the policy, she fled to the countryside. At that time, the 2 of us were fostered at my grandmother's house in the countryside, and Dongyu was my greatest support. Dongyu was very good-looking. He had inherited his mother's good looks. He had delicate features and was very handsome, especially his pair of clear black and white eyes. One look at them could make people lose their souls. Hence, many girls had liked Dongyu since he was young. However, perhaps because he was born in winter, Dongyu's personality was a little cold. He had been too distant from the other children since he was young. Even his parents were a little distant from him. This coldness was even more obvious during the rebellious period of his youth. And from the beginning to the end, the only one who could freely get close to him was probably me. Perhaps it was because we were blood-related, but Dongyu doted on me to the bone. Even his parents couldn't compare to this kind of love. According to Grandma, when I was born, Dongyu was still very young. He had thin arms and legs, and there wasn't a single ounce of flesh on his arms. However, he was able to carry me steadily and never fell or knocked my head. At that time, after my mother gave birth, she wasn't in good health. Before I was a month old, she asked Grandma to take care of me. Dongyu, on the other hand, followed her silently. He had never been close to anyone since he was young, but he liked to hug me and play with me, calling my nickname over and over again. Chun-chun, chun-chun. When I cried, he patiently teased me. When I was hungry, he gently coaxed me. At night, it was Dongyu who hugged me and sang nursery rhymes to sleep. Chapter 30-33. Yes, he really doted on me. I naively thought that even if Dongyu was the only person in the world who doted on me, I would still be the happiest girl in the world. I remembered Grandma mentioning that when I was 1 year old, Dongyu held my little hand and taught me how to walk step by step. He was half squatting in front of me. At that time, I was chubby from being raised by Grandma. I wore a lot of winter clothes and struggled to walk on my wobbly legs, wobbling towards him with my arms outstretched. In a moment of carelessness, I fell hard. Although it wasn't serious, a layer of skin was abraded on my palm. Before I could cry out loud, Dongyu's eyes turned red. He hugged me in a panic. For the first time in my life, I showed an expression other than gentleness and indifference on his face. As I grew older, I could run more steadily and gradually became sturdier. I played with the other children, playing hide-and-seek and catching cicadas. I was really crazy. When I was young, I loved the nighttime the most. At that time, we were still young and there were no inhibitions. Every night, Grandma would bathe Dongyu. When I was young, I didn't know what shame was. I would climb into the bathtub on all fours and squeeze with him. I especially liked to tease him. I even pointed at Dongyu's undeveloped little guy and asked Grandma why my brother's part was different from mine. Grandma would always laugh at my teasing. She would scratch the bridge of my nose and laugh at me for being shameless. On the contrary, Dongyu would be a little shy. So much so that when I was naked next to him, he would freeze and not dare to move. Grandma would apply the shower gel on us. I liked the refreshing smell very much, and I liked the fact that my body smelled the same as Dongyu's. I was afraid of the dark and didn't like to sleep with Grandma, but I was willing to squeeze into a small bed with Dongyu. At night, I would often wrap my little arms and legs around him without restraint, pestering him to play rock, paper, scissors. This boring game became the most interesting pastime. When the moon was high in the sky, I couldn't sleep. I liked to lie beside him, hold my little head, and listen to him sing and tell stories. Dongyu's voice was very pleasant. It was as clear as a wind chime with a hint of childishness. He sang gently in my ear. At that time, he only knew how to sing a few songs that he had learned from music class. But I never got tired of listening to him. Every night in my childhood, I always fell asleep with his soft singing. In her memories of her youth, Dongyu was somewhat bland. He always locked himself in that world, either doing his homework or reading some famous works outside of class. He had been taking piano lessons since he was 6, so I often pestered him to teach me. At that time, in the eyes of many children, Dongyu was cold and unapproachable. He was so noble and aloof. Thinking of his background from the city, he was not like these wild children who grew up playing mud and catching frogs in the countryside. His body was clean, and there was a bit of scholarly elegance. This kind of temperament was not something an ordinary child could have. Good etiquette and refined speech were used by many parents as teaching materials for their children. Chapter 30-34. It's delicious. I'm asking my daughter. Yun Shirshir had the urge to roll her eyes. Unknowingly, it was getting closer and closer to her due date. Yun Shirshir's tummy was getting bigger and bigger. Perhaps big wasn't enough to describe her round tummy. In Yu Yu's words, Yun Shirshir's tummy seemed to be hiding a ball. Xiaoyiqin innocently fantasized. Will there be 2 little sisters? Yun Shirshir broke out in cold sweat when she heard this. Yu Yu nodded in agreement. He explained. Our family has the genes of twins. Look, mommy and uncle are twins and they gave birth to us. If that's the case, we might even have twins. Xiaoyiqin clapped happily. That's great. If that's the case, maybe mommy has 2 little sisters in her tummy. This way you can have one and I can have one. We won't have to fight for it. Yun Shirshir laughed when she heard this. You guys are treating your little sisters like toys. Yu Yu and Xiaoyiqin chuckled. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but pour cold water on them. You guys can give up. There's only one little sister in my tummy. That's what the ultrasound doctor said. So don't harbor any fantasies that you shouldn't have. Sob. The 2 little lads wanted to cry but had no tears. In the 9th month of her pregnancy, Yun Shirshir also suffered a lot. At night she couldn't sleep so well. Because of her lack of appetite, she couldn't eat much for dinner. Muyaja would coax her to eat some fruits, but at night, she would be hungry again. She would wake up from hunger, but she wouldn't have any appetite. Sometimes she wouldn't wake up from hunger, but she would be awakened by cramps in her legs. Her legs were a little swollen, and she couldn't walk properly. Sometimes when she was lying on the bed, Muyaja would massage her legs. It wasn't too hard, but it was enough to relieve her pain. She felt extremely guilty. After all, as the president, managing such a large company was not an easy job. Every day, he rushed to the company early in the morning. After dealing with the affairs, he rushed back. He also had to go for regular prenatal checkups and learn how to take care of children. He was so busy. For her, he was worried sick. She couldn't see, but she could feel it. Compared to the first time she was pregnant, having this man around made her feel that being pregnant was a very happy thing. Gradually, she began to feel sleepy and lazy. She did not like to go for walks anymore. However, Muyaja kept a close eye on her. It was inevitable that she would take a walk after dinner every day. The doctor speculated that the due date would be in mid-November. As the due date approached, Muyaja could not help but start to feel nervous. After waiting for so long, they had finally entered the due date without incident. The next 20 days were naturally not to be taken lightly. He took care of her even more carefully. When there were still more than 10 days before the due date, he booked a special ward in the obstetrics and gynecology hospital and arranged for her to enter. When Gong Jie found out that Yun Shirshir's due date was approaching, he finished his work and rushed over. He accompanied her in the hospital every day, looking forward to the arrival of the little princess. However, just as the due date was approaching, a small accident happened. On this day, Muyaja was at the shareholders' meeting. Minyu received a call from the hospital saying that Yun Shirshir's water broke. Her water broke. Chapter 30-35. Muyaja was confused. There were still a few days before the due date, and the doctor said that it wouldn't be brought forward. Only then did he feel at ease and go back to the company to handle his work. But now, someone called to say that the amniotic fluid had broken early. How could it have broken early? He left the company and drove all the way to the hospital. He arrived at the hospital anxiously. Just as he reached the entrance of the delivery room, he happened to see a few doctors walking out. He rushed forward and grabbed the doctor's collar, asking, "Where is she? Has she given birth?" Chairman Mu calmed down. How can she give birth so soon? He turned around and realized that there was already a group of people waiting at the door. Gong Jie, Huajin, and Xiao Shui had also rushed over when they received the news. Yu Yu and Xiaoichen stood at the side with a guilty look on their faces, as if they were very guilty. There wasn't enough time to inform the others, and Hua Jin was afraid that it would be inconvenient to have too many people around, so he didn't announce it. The group of people discussed nervously at the entrance of the delivery room. They were worried but also looking forward to it. Muyaja couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. He questioned the doctor. Isn't the due date not here yet? Why did the amniotic fluid break early? The doctor's lips twitched. He thought to himself, you have to ask your wife about this. It turned out that Yu Yu and Xiaoichen were afraid that Yun Shishir would be too bored. So they turned on the television and switched to a talk show. Just listening to a talk show could relieve one's boredom. However, this episode of the talk show was too funny. Yun Shishir listened with great interest. When she heard a joke, she laughed a little too hard and actually broke her amniotic fluid. When the amniotic fluid broke, Gongjia was dumbfounded. He couldn't understand what was going on. He hurriedly found the doctor, who explained that the amniotic fluid had broken early. Hence, Yu Yu and Xiaoichen shrank to the side guiltily. Her amniotic fluid had broken, so she could only hurry up and induce labor. Fortunately, the due date was not far away. It was not a big deal, but she had to induce labor. The doctor pushed Yun Shishir into the waiting room. She had just been induced to give birth and did an internal examination. Yun Shishir was in so much pain that she wanted to die. The internal examination was quite painful. Yun Shishir had experienced it once before, but after a few years, she had almost forgotten it. Now that she was going through it again, she immediately regretted it. According to Hua Jin's description, her howls during the internal examination were incomparable to those of a pig being slaughtered. It was said that a woman's temper was at its worst when she was about to give birth. Yun Shishir pointed at him and complained, Hua Jin, how dare you gloat over my misfortune? How dare you say that my cry is like slaughtering a pig? Wait till I give birth, I won't let you off. The doctor gave her another dose of medicine and said that the cervix had only been dilated by 2 fingers. She had to wait until the cervix was dilated by 10 fingers before she could be officially pushed into the delivery room. As for the internal examination, the doctor used his finger to check the cervix's opening. After the internal examination, Yun Shishir heard a mother-to-be screaming in the delivery room next door. I want a cesarean section. I want a cesarean section. I don't want a natural birth. Ah, Yun Shishir shuddered when she heard it. Although it was not the first time, when she thought about the pain during labor again, she felt a sense of bleakness like a warrior cutting off his wrist. Just as she was feeling uneasy, another pregnant woman was pushed into the waiting room. She was in so much pain that she kept changing her position. One moment she was kneeling, standing, lying down and wailing. When Yun Shishir thought about how unbearable the next 10 hours would be, she became even more disheartened. The whole world seemed to have turned dark. Chapter 30-36. Muyaja walked into the waiting room and saw Yun Shishir lying on her side on the bed in a strange position. She was hugging her round belly and groaning in pain. Her face was covered in cold sweat, as if she was trying her best to suppress the pain. Seeing her like this, he felt an indescribable pain in his heart. He had looked up a lot of information before, and it was said that it was especially painful for women to give birth. In a woman's life, the pain of giving birth was just like floating clouds. There was an employee in the company who suffered a massive hemorrhage during childbirth. It was so painful that she almost flew to the sky. He walked to the bed and sat down. Yun Shishir turned her head and realized that it was him. She immediately complained, Muyaja, it's all your fault. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have to suffer like this. It's all your fault. Muyaja gave an ungraceful smile, but it was an apologetic one. Yun Shishir felt even more unbalanced. Hearing him laugh, she said gloomily, What are you laughing at? You still have the cheek to laugh. I'm going to die from the pain. Muyaja caressed her cheek, his gaze gentle. Now that she was about to give birth as a man, he naturally couldn't argue with her at this time. Even if she pointed at him and scolded him, he would accept it. If scolding me makes you feel better, then go ahead. Yun Shishir was stunned. Another wave of contractions came. It was so painful that the corners of her eyes twitched violently. She narrowed her eyes. When she thought of the grievances and suffering she had suffered for the past 9 months, her anger flared up. Humph. I'm not giving birth anymore. Muyaja coaxed her. Okay, I'm not giving birth anymore. I'm serious. I want to go home. If you want to give birth, you give birth. I'm not giving birth. Okay, I'll give birth. Yun Shirshir was even angrier. He went along with her words, but she was even more unhappy. She said with tears streaming down her face, I don't want to give birth anymore. It hurts. At this moment she couldn't care less about being reserved. She wailed, I really don't want to give birth anymore. At this point in time, how could she stop giving birth just because she didn't want to? Muyaja was both angry and amused. He coaxed her gently, bear with it. It'll be over soon. He could understand her anxiety and uneasiness, but although his heart ached for her, he really wanted to bear all her pain for himself, but he was helpless. After all, he was a man and did not have this ability. Talking while standing is really easy. It's all your fault. Yun Shirshir rubbed her belly, feeling wronged. This girl is so troublesome. She's been in my belly for a few days. When she's about to come out, she's so disappointing. She refuses to come out. A nurse passing by said, Your cervix has only opened by 2 fingers. Wait a little longer. When it opens by 5 fingers, the rest will be quick. It's painful now because you're having contractions. Bear with it. After saying that, he hurried away. Yun Shirshir groaned inwardly. Yet another person who was talking while standing there. Muyaja chuckled softly. He lowered his head and kissed the corner of her lips. He said gently, Be good, wifey. When our daughter comes out, I'll help you teach her a lesson and smack her butt. When our daughter comes out, can you bear to do it? As Yun Shirshir spoke, she had another strong contraction and another spasm. It was so painful that she almost cried out for her mother. It was fine when it didn't hurt, but when the contractions started, it hurt so much that she wanted to scratch the wall. It was simply killing her. Yun Shirshir was in so much pain that she smashed her head against the wall. Muyaja hurriedly protected her and said angrily, What are you doing? Let me faint. It won't hurt if I faint, she said self-righteously. Chapter 30-37. Yesterday when she passed by the delivery room, she heard the people inside crying and screaming. She was still laughing, but in the blink of an eye it was her turn. How was this giving birth? This was King killing her. There was a particularly strong contraction, and she was in so much pain that her eyes couldn't move. She groaned on the bed. Muyaja, who was guarding by the side, was even more nervous. Gong Jie and the others outside the door were also waiting anxiously. They couldn't enter, so they could only stare at each other. Gong Jie, in particular, was so anxious that he called all the people in the gynecology and obstetrics department over. A group of people in white coats came over. After another examination, they said that the cervix had not fully opened. Not fully opened? Gong Jie was anxious. He grabbed the doctor's collar and asked, When can I give birth? The doctor was so frightened that he couldn't speak clearly. He explained that everyone's physique was different, so he couldn't make a conclusion. As time dragged on, a few long hours passed. In the blink of an eye, it was evening. Yun Shirshir was in so much pain that she was about to collapse, but there was no movement. The contractions also became more frequent. Gradually, they went from 1 every 10 minutes to 1 every 3 to 5 minutes. The nurse told her to rest for a while and save her energy. If she really gave birth later, she wouldn't have the energy to give birth. That would be really troublesome. Yun Shirshir thought to herself, I want to sleep too, but the problem is that I can't. Muyaja remained patient, silently praying for his daughter to come quickly. He even put his hand on his stomach and said to the little guy in his stomach, Yueyao, come out quickly. Don't torment your mommy. Yun Shirshir gritted her teeth, exasperated. What was the use of this? At night, they did another internal examination. The nurse shook her head and said that it was only 3 fingers. What? After so much time, it was only 3 fingers? Yun Shirshir was so angry that she fainted. When she woke up and opened her eyes, Muyaja was still guarding by her side in the waiting room. She didn't know how she fainted. She even suspected that she had fainted from the pain. Xiao Shui, who was outside the door, was also very nervous. At night they ordered takeout, but no one had the appetite to eat. They all stared at the waiting room in fear, afraid that they would miss even a second. It wasn't until 8 o'clock in the evening that Yun Shirshir experienced the strongest wave of contractions. She was in so much pain that she was already in a daze. In her daze, she saw a few nurses coming in and out, and another person came in to do a prenatal checkup. Then she said excitedly, "The cervix has opened to 7 fingers. You can enter the delivery room now." Then the nurse asked Muyaja, "Sir, are you going to accompany your wife to give birth?" Muyaja nodded without hesitation. "Of course. I want to accompany her." "Okay. Then come with me to change into sterile clothes." "All right." Muyaja turned around and held Yun Shirshir's hand tightly. He smiled and said, "Madam, wait for me, okay? I'll be right there." "Okay." Yun Shirshir nodded weakly. Muyaja turned around and left. A few minutes later, a few nurses walked in and pushed her into the delivery room. Only then did she regain consciousness. However, the cervix was still open. Every minute and every second was a living torture. Chapter 30-38. When Muyaja walked in after changing his clothes, he saw her lying on the bed. Because she had struggled, her face was extremely haggard, her hair was disheveled, and her clothes were disheveled. He was stunned for a few seconds before he reacted. He walked to her side and held her hand tightly, his heart aching for her. Yun Shirshir called out his name in pain. "Muyaja. I'm here. Hubby. I'm here. Hubby, I'm in so much pain that I can't take it anymore." Muyaja's heart ached terribly. "What do you mean you can't wake up? My wife can do it. I don't want to give birth anymore. Boo-hoo." Yun Shirshir was utterly defeated. Muyaja's eyes were red with heartache. He turned around and grabbed the nurse. "My wife said she doesn't want to give birth anymore. She's in so much pain. Is there any way?" The nurse said, "Wait a moment." Then she turned around and left. After a while, the nurse came back with a delivery ball. It was about half the height of Yu Yu's body. It was very elastic and looked like a bigger yoga ball. She said, "Help your wife sit on this ball and weigh it a few times. This will help open the cervix." Muyaja nodded and helped Yun Shirshir sit on the delivery ball. He supported her body and supported her steadily. If it were in the past, this would be too childish and he would never do it. But now, he was willing to pay any price to help her get rid of her suffering. Yun Shirshir was tormented by wave after wave of excruciating pain. This time the pain wasn't like before. It was as if 2 of her bones were being separated bit by bit. She was in so much pain that she desperately grabbed Muyaja's arm. Her other hand was like a cat, desperately scratching whatever she could reach. Muyaja looked at her frantic expression, and his heart ached so much that he almost suffocated. Especially when he saw that her nails were broken and embedded in her flesh because of her scratching. His heart ached even more. He suddenly stretched out his arm and said, "If it hurts, bite me. Don't torture yourself like this." Yun Shirshir hugged his arm, feeling wronged. She opened her mouth and bit him, but she couldn't bear to use force. When the nurses saw this scene, especially when they saw the heartache in Muyaja's eyes, they felt warmth in their hearts. Many husbands had accompanied their wives to this delivery room before, but most of them stood there like a block of wood. Among them, there were even some men who were impatient and full of complaints. When dealing with their wives, they did not have anything good to say to comfort them. They only said, "Bear with it. Bear with it." During the delivery, many men were stunned by the scene. Some of them couldn't accept it and ran out. But this man was different. His heart really ached. Gradually, Yun Shirshir felt that she couldn't take it anymore, and wanted to lie down on the bed. The nurse came over to take a look and said that it was about time, so she helped her lie down on the bed. Lying on the delivery bed, the pain engulfed her all of a sudden. Yun Shirshir felt as if she was struggling on the sea and was about to drown. Wave after wave hit her, and the whole world was spinning. "Harder!" The nurses rushed up and surrounded Yun Shirshir nervously. Muyaja held her hand tightly by the bed and encouraged her. "Shirshir, you can do it. You're almost out." As he said this, he followed the nurse's instructions and stuffed a piece of chocolate into her mouth. Chapter 30-39. At midnight, after 4 hours of torment in the delivery room, Gong Jie and the two little fellows were pacing around anxiously outside the door when they heard a long and crisp cry coming from the delivery room. Gong Jie was so shocked that he rushed to the door and looked inside excitedly. Soon a nurse walked to the door and said with relief, "It's done! It's done! Mother and daughter are safe! Mother and daughter are safe! Wow! Sister! Sister is out!" The Mu family's beloved little princess had finally arrived in this world under everyone's anticipation. Gong Jie was so excited when he heard this that he immediately hugged Yu Yu and Xiaoi Chen. He was as happy as a child. Yu Yu was overjoyed. Uncle's beloved niece is finally here. Uncle has been waiting for a long time, but it's not in vain. When Yun Shishir was pregnant, Gong Jie often video called her across the ocean. He was also having fun. Like Mu Yaja, he said to her stomach in all seriousness, "Yuyao, it's Uncle. We'll be able to see each other in a few months. Uncle will be waiting for you." Therefore, when he knew that Yun Shishir was about to give birth, Gong Jie immediately flew over. Unfortunately, Yun Yeqing could not be present at such an important moment. He could not walk and could not leave the breathing mask. Therefore, it would be difficult for him to see this scene with his own eyes. Xiao Shui was also very excited. She hugged Hua Jin without reservation and laughed heartily. Hua Jin waited silently at the door for a long time. He finally heaved a sigh of relief when he learned that the mother and daughter were safe. "Oh my, it's a little princess. She's so beautiful." The nurse carried the baby, wiped his body clean, pressed his footprints and weighed him. After a series of examinations, the baby was very healthy. He opened his two chubby little paws and cried loudly. His voice was clear and loud. She was placed in a swaddle and carried to the man who was waiting by the bed. After giving birth, Yun Shishir was exhausted. Her clothes were wet with sweat. Mu Yaja's heart ached for her. He kept kissing her and smiling, but his eyes couldn't help but become wet and red. "Shishir, I love you." He kept kissing her, but he didn't get tired of it. Yun Shishir didn't have the strength to respond, but she heard his mellow voice choking with emotion. Her nose was also a little sore. "I love you too." Mu Yaja sighed in his heart. Gestation is such a miraculous thing. He had once again created a cute little life with her. Unlike her first pregnancy this time, he had been by her side the entire time. And the most fortunate thing was that he had witnessed this moment with his own eyes. Thank God. Mother and daughter are safe. "Sir, look, your daughter is so beautiful. He was just born, but he has a head of shiny black hair." Mu Yaja immediately and carefully took the child from the nurse's arms. He finally saw the little guy who had been in her stomach for more than 9 months. His expression was a little sincere and solemn, and even a little nervous. Although he usually looked like he was strategizing and always had a calm and composed face, when he carried the child, he was a little flustered, afraid that he wouldn't hold it well. Until a magical scene happened. For some reason, the child stopped crying when she was in his arms. Chapter 30-40. Just like Xiaoi Chen, the newborn baby's face was red and wrinkled. The nurse said it was pretty, but he thought it was ugly. However, he knew that the baby had just been born and hadn't grown up yet. Just by looking at the baby's eyes, he knew that it would be very beautiful when it grew up, like Xiaoi Chen and also like Yu Yu. However, the baby suddenly stopped crying. He looked up nervously and asked, "Why did she stop crying?" The nurse smiled and said, "This is the first time we've seen it. She was crying so much when she was in our arms. Why did she stop crying when she was in your arms? Maybe the father and daughter have telepathy." "Don't worry, sir. We've done a checkup. The baby is very healthy." Mu Yaja's heart finally calmed down. It was a good thing that the baby was healthy. The more he looked at the chubby little angel in his arms, the more satisfied he felt. There was a doting smile in the corners of his eyes, and his expression relaxed a little. As he smiled, the baby's lips curled up slightly as if she was smiling. He was surprised, so he carried the baby to Yun Shishir and said gently, "Honey, look, Yuyao is smiling." Yun Shishir held onto the railing of the delivery bed weakly and sat up slightly. Suddenly she smiled weakly and said, "I can't see." Mu Yaja felt a little upset when he heard that. "Can I touch her?" The nurse said, "Yes, you can." She reached out and touched the baby's lips. She was surprised when she touched the baby's lips. Eh? She's really smiling. Wuxia was worried that she wouldn't have the strength to sit up properly, so he carried the baby closer to her so that she could get closer to the baby. Yun Shishir's heart suddenly surged. When she first found out that she was pregnant, she was a little taken aback. She thought that having Yu and Xiaoyichen around was enough to cause a ruckus. But when she saw this little guy with her own eyes, her heart was filled with endless emotions, and the corners of her eyes couldn't help but become moist. She suddenly felt that the pain she had suffered just now wasn't in vain. If her child could be born healthy, all the suffering she had suffered would be worth it. So cute. Her maternal instincts were stimulated to the extreme as she reached out to carry the child. Wuxia carefully watched over her and realized that, although she was exhausted, she was still able to hold the child steadily. This was probably the power of motherhood. Wuxiao, you're finally here. Daddy and Mommy have been waiting for you for a long time. Yun Shishir said and gently kissed the corner of her eyebrows. She touched the baby's eyes and found that she couldn't open them. Her eyes were closed, and her eyelashes were long, thick, and slightly curled. In this aspect she resembled her father a lot. In her warm embrace, the baby suddenly opened her mouth and moaned. Her little mouth moved a little, as if she wanted to suck on something instinctively. The nurse was amused. She's going to drink milk. Yun Shishir asked. Can she eat now? There's no rush to feed her. The little guy is so obedient and doesn't make a fuss. There are so many babies who just came out and they're crying so hard. She must take after her father in this aspect, right? Wuxia's face strangely turned red, and he smiled. He was actually shy. Don't say any more. Daddy is shy. Chapter 3041. Hubby, you're going to be a father again. He smiled, raised his hand and gently caressed her cheek. Touched, he said. My wife, it's been hard on you. I won't. Yun Shishir lowered her head again and blinked. She wanted to see the little princess more clearly, but her vision was blurry. Even though she couldn't see, she felt more satisfied and happy with the child in her arms. As long as she can be healthy, I feel that all the pain and suffering is worth it. Are you tired? Why don't you rest for a while? Wuxia took the child from her arms, not wanting her to work too hard. Yun Shishir nodded and didn't force herself. She was happy that the child was born and wanted to hold it for a while longer. However, she was really exhausted after such an experience. Hence, she closed her eyes and fell asleep very quickly. When she woke up again, she had already been sent back to the ward. When she was awake, she heard Gong Jia and Hua Jin arguing. Wuxiao was smiling at me. This means that my niece and I have telepathy. Hua Jin emphasized. Before you came over, when I held her little hand, she was already smiling. Shut up. It's true. You're being unreasonable. Do you believe that I'll beat you up? I do. Then tell me, who exactly was she smiling at? You. Gong Jia's domineering tone and Hua Jin's resentful tone formed a stark contrast. The child had already been sent to the room. Gong Jia and Hua Jin rushed over excitedly to see the little princess. Hua Jin was the first to go up and grab Yuyao's hand. In the end, just as Yuyao's lips curled up, Gong Jia came over and saw it. He was pleasantly surprised and said that his niece was smiling at him. Hua Jin emphasized that Yuyao was smiling at him, and he just happened to come over. The Gong Jia could not take it anymore. His face immediately darkened. Wuxia stayed by her bedside and held her hand. Although he wanted to be with his daughter, Gong Jia, Hua Jin, Yu Xiaoyichen and Xiao Shui surrounded the little princess. With so many people accompanying the little princess, he felt sorry for his own woman and naturally wanted to protect his wife. For his little princess, his daughter had suffered so much. She was a daughter after all, so there would be a lot of time to accompany her in the future. But his woman had suffered so much, so he naturally had to take good care of her. Yun Shishir didn't open her eyes. She didn't have any strength, so she fell asleep again. Yu looked at the little princess and felt a little curious. Little sister's face is so wrinkled. Xiaoyichen said. I was like this when I was born too. His face is so wrinkled and ugly. Yu gave him a sidelong glance. You've seen it before? Of course. Xiaoyichen said. Daddy took a photo of me and even showed it to me. Oh, it's so disgusting. Hua Jin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How can you say that you're disgusting? But it's really disgusting, Xiaoqian said pitifully. Then he changed the topic and said proudly, but Daddy said that I was just born at that time and hadn't grown up yet. Aren't I still so beautiful now? Little sister is definitely prettier than me. Yu looked at him quietly from the side and then used his poisonous tongue. I hope little sister isn't as thick-skinned as you. Chapter 30-42. You're the one who's not pretty. Xiaoqian was not angry. Instead he retorted, we're twins. If you say that I'm not pretty, aren't you just indirectly saying that you're ugly? I'm more classy than you. I'm a little gentleman. I'm a little gentleman too. Gongjie and Hua Jin stopped their bickering, but the two lads continued their debate relentlessly. Gongjie shushed them. Keep your voice down. That's right. If the little princess wakes up, are you going to be responsible for feeding her? Xiao Shui said. Yu and Xiaoqian then tacitly shut their little mouths. Gongjie said, I want to hug her. Hua Jin said, you can't hug her. If she wakes up she'll really cry. Shirshir is still sleeping and there's no one to feed her. Moreover, the nurse said that it's best to wait for the child to wake up naturally before feeding her. Xiaoqian said, when little sister was in mommy's stomach, she didn't drink milk for more than 9 months. Wouldn't she be hungry? Everyone was silent. This question also stumped Yu. Gongjie couldn't answer it either. The group of people silently looked at Muyaja. Gongjie said, brother-in-law, you're knowledgeable. Why don't you answer this question? Muyaja felt like an old bespectacled professor, and the group of people in front of him were all like giant babies. He ignored them. Everyone knew what was good for them. At this moment Muyaja was guarding his wife. He couldn't be bothered with them. The group of people looked at the little princess fondly. In their eyes the little Yueyao was like a little angel flapping her wings. Her entire body was glowing. Even though Muyaja sent people to guard the news of Yun Shirshir giving birth and surrounded the hospital tightly, there were still many media outlets that rushed over. Ever since she became pregnant, because Muyaja was very protective of his wife, Yun Shirshir disappeared from the public for a long time. Fans were curious and looked forward to hearing news about Yun Shirshir. However, when the reporters rushed over, they were stopped by the bodyguards at the entrance. They were chased away by the bodyguards. Some of them insisted on going to the hospital, so the bodyguards smashed their cameras and chased them away. Muyaja's attitude was so rude and unreasonable, because he did not want the little princess to be exposed to the public. He naturally wanted to protect his daughter well. These paparazzi were angry, but they did not dare to say anything. After all, the Shengyu financial group was so big, and they knew Muyaja's means. Naturally, they did not dare to say anything. Some good friends naturally came to the hospital to visit when they heard the news of such a joyous occasion. However, at this time Yu and Xiaoqian were like door gods. No one could hug, kiss, or touch them. At most, they could only take a few glances and exchange a few pleasantries before leaving. When Qinzhou rushed over, he was not even allowed to enter the door because the little princess was awake, and Yun Shirshir was breastfeeding her. He came in a hurry because he took time out of his schedule. He still had something to do and could not see Shirshir, so he could only leave a few words with Hua Jin and give his blessings before leaving. As soon as Qinzhou left, Jiang Shun and Lu Jinyu came with fruits and some tonics. Just as they reached the door, they were chased away by Muyaja. Chapter 30-43. Jiang Shun felt that it was unfair and complained to his boss. Can't we even visit the little princess? That's right. You're her uncle after all. Why should you visit her? Muyaja glared at Jiang Shun and asked, has the acquisition of Solomon been settled? Jiang Shun looked away guiltily. He then questioned Lu Jinyu. Has the Central Jingguang land auction been registered? Lu Jinyu coughed and cleared his throat. Aha. Why aren't you getting lost? Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shun wiped away their bitter tears and returned to the office with their arms around each other's shoulders. A week after Yu Yao was born, her face was no longer wrinkled like when she was just born. The little girl's face had already returned to its original color. It was white and tender, as if it could be broken by the slightest breeze. Sometimes, Yun Shirshir would sigh with emotion as she hugged Yao. This was probably bliss. However, there were also times when she felt blissful. For example, when she was breastfeeding, the little Yueyao would snuggle in her arms and enjoy the milk. Perhaps because the little Yueyao was extremely hungry, she would use a lot of force when she was suckling, as if she wanted to suck her entire soul away. Muyaja said that this girl was like a greedy little cat when she was suckling. Yun Shirshir felt that it was especially so, but she was so happy and fierce when she was suckling. It was quite painful. Why was she so greedy? When Yu was suckling, she wasn't like her. She was very reserved and quiet. She wasn't so fierce. But then again, why else would there be a saying about using all the strength of suckling milk? Haha. This frankincense was quite magical for a baby in swaddling clothes. Every time she was breastfeeding, she would carry the crying baby into Yun Shirshir's arms. The little guy would almost instinctively burrow into her arms, accurately suckle his target, and then suckle hard. Yu said that she had seen a piglet sucking milk under an old sow's stomach on television. It was just like this. Although they did look alike. However, Muyaja was the first to disagree. Who are you calling a piggy? Who's the old sow? Yu smiled apologetically and turned to leave. This brat deserves a beating. Muyaja immediately coaxed her. Don't listen to him, you're not an old sow. She had originally thought that it was just a child's babble, but this man explained it seriously and even coaxed her. The more she listened, the more uncomfortable she felt. When she was breastfeeding, he was watching from the side. He was completely focused and did not take his eyes off her. He leaned very close to her and watched as the little princess's little mouth opened and closed. Unexpectedly, she also swallowed. Yun Shirshir was shocked and asked, "What's that sound? Why did it sound like he was swallowing his saliva?" Muyaja snorted coldly, sounding displeased. Nothing. Seeing how the little Yueyao was eating so well and was leaning on Yun Shirshir's chest, occupying the spot that originally belonged to him, Muyaja felt a little uncomfortable. Fortunately, it was a daughter this time. If it was a son, he would feel even more indignant. However, was it because she was a little princess? He was happy to give her this privilege. Yun Shirshir did not know whether to laugh or cry. What's the matter? Gluttonous. Yun Shirshir blushed and couldn't help but push him. Hey, don't tell me, you want to drink milk too? Yes. Chapter 3044. Hey, don't be rash. You have such a big appetite. If you finish it all, what will Yueyao drink? He couldn't help but give in when he saw how serious she was. He scratched her nose lightly and said, I'm just teasing you. Yun Shirshir laughed and said, I'm teasing you too. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. The deep love in their eyes couldn't be concealed at all. Outside the door, Yu and Xiaoichen were sitting on stools. Even though the two little guys were still young, Muyaja insisted that they stay away when Yun Shirshir was breastfeeding. His attitude was not to be disobeyed. Yu said indignantly, Daddy is really narrow-minded. Xiaoichen said enviously, looking at little sister drinking milk, I actually feel that she's enjoying it. Poor me, I grew up drinking milk powder. Yu asked curiously, what milk powder did you drink? Xiaoichen shook his head. I don't know. I didn't know anything back then. I stopped drinking milk when I was 3. Oh, I'll ask Daddy later. Seeing that Yu was so insistent on knowing the brand of milk powder, Xiaoichen couldn't help but feel puzzled. You want to drink it too? No. Then why do you keep asking about the brand of milk powder I drink? Yu said seriously, if little sister drinks milk powder in the future, she won't drink this brand. Xiaoichen was shocked. Why? I suspect that you're so stupid because you drank this brand of milk powder. Xiaoichen was once again struck by Yu's venomous tongue. He slumped into the chair, unable to get up. However, after spending so much time together, Xiaoichen was already used to Yu's venomous tongue. He ignored Yu and clenched his little fists tightly as though he was making a vow. He encouraged himself and said, in the future, with a woman in our family, I must become stronger. Only then can I protect Mommy and my beloved sister. Yu said, you just have to be smarter. Don't drag your sister down when the time comes. Xiaoichen felt wronged and said, Yu, my heart hurts when you talk about your brother like that. Since you know that your brother is the oldest, It'll be embarrassing if little sister crushes your IQ in the future. Yu continued. In the future, when little sister goes to school, she'll come to you with her homework. If you can't answer the questions correctly, little sister will despise you. Little Yichen hummed in acknowledgement before saying, Don't I have you? In the future, if little sister has a problem, she'll come to you. What about you? Yu looked at him with disdain. Me. Xiaoyichen smiled proudly. If anyone dares to bully little sister in the future, I'll let them have a taste of my fists. Violent maniac. What else can I do? Xiaoyichen put his hands on his hips indignantly. If little sister gets bullied outside, do you think she can rely on your fancy martial arts skills? Yu blushed guiltily. Indeed, his fists and kicks were no match for Xiaoyichen's. He didn't know where Xiaoyichen got his strange strength from. After feeding Yueyao, little Yueyao settled down. Muyaja opened the door and let the two little guys into the room. Yu ran to the bedside excitedly. He straightened his neck and said, Mommy, Mommy, I want to hug little sister. However, Muyaja said, No. When Muyaja saw that he really wanted to hug little Yueyao, he nodded and said, Okay. Thus Yu excitedly took little Yueyao from Xiaoyichen's arms. He had learned how to carry babies from the confinement nanny, and he had learned it together with Xiaoyichen. This was the first time he carried little Yueyao in his arms. She was so small and soft that he could not bear to use his strength. Chapter 30:46. When little Yueyao saw him, she was also curious. She widened her eyes slightly and looked at him curiously. Yu gazed at her tenderly, his heart filled with tenderness. He had been looking forward to this little thing for a long time. He had always dreamed of having a younger sister, and had been looking forward to it for a long time. He also had high hopes for Muyaja. Fortunately, his daddy had not let him down and had not made him wait for too long. His younger sister had been born for more than a week. Because she was sleeping most of the time, he rarely saw her open her eyes. Especially when she was smiling with her eyes open, it was very rare. Once, he heard his daddy mention that his younger sister loved to smile. When she smiled, her eyes would curve like two crescent moons. He was even more curious, but he never had the chance to see it. Even though his health was not good and he needed to rest recently and couldn't run much, he couldn't bear to go home when his younger sister was in the hospital. Every time he reluctantly went home and lay in bed, the image of his younger sister's young face would always appear in his mind. His heart felt so full. As if there was nothing filling it up, there was a voice that kept repeating, You finally have a younger sister. From now on, you must be the best brother in the world. Let your younger sister be the happiest sister in the world. When Yun Shishir was pregnant, he and Xiaoyichen wrote in their diaries seriously, looking forward to their younger sister's arrival day and night. When Zhongli came to visit Yun Shishir, she deliberately teased him and said, When you have a younger sister in the future, Daddy and Mommy will dote on her. They won't dote on you anymore. Now that the two-child policy was fully open, every family could have a second child. Zhongli also wanted to have a second child. She wanted to have another son so that she could have both a son and a daughter. However, when she accidentally mentioned this to her daughter was very resistant and said that she didn't want a younger brother or sister. If she had a second child, she would run away from home. Nowadays, the majority of people were only children. However, when the second child era came, many older children were very resistant to it. Originally, the family revolved around one person. If they had a second child, it would mean that the younger brother or sister would take away the love that originally belonged to them. Naturally, the eldest son was unwilling. However, Yu said, Even if my younger sister is born, Mommy will still dote on me. Says who? Look, your younger sister is so cute. Your mommy loves her so much. From now on, her love will not only belong to you and Xiaoyichen. When Yu heard this, he smiled and said, If it's a younger sister, it's okay. He lowered his head and looked at the crib. His heart seemed to be filled with tenderness as he looked at the little life dotingly. He said softly, If it's a little sister, it's okay to share all the love that Mommy has for me with her. I will also pamper her and grow up with her. Zhongli looked at him in surprise, only to see the gentleness in his eyes. He was so touched by this child. She said to Yun Shirshir, "Shirshir, you're so lucky to have these two considerate kids. And I'm so jealous of you." Yun Shirshir was also very touched. She had asked Yu in private if he would be jealous if they revolved around their younger sister in the future. Chapter 30:47. Yun Shirshir's heart was filled with warmth when she heard these words. At that moment, Yu hugged his little sister. His heart was filled with emotions. Ever since his little sister was born, there had been constant changes. Even though these changes were minimal in Yu's eyes, they were huge changes. Now she was gradually growing up. He lowered his head and sniffed gently. The little one had a milky fragrance that was unique to babies. How fragrant! Could it be that he was like this when he was young? Yu was thinking about it. However, the moment he lowered his head, little Yuyao's nose suddenly wrinkled. Her beautiful eyebrows were tightly knitted together. A storm was brewing. Xiaoyichen noticed that something was wrong with her expression and exclaimed. In the next second, little Yueyao suddenly opened her mouth, straightened her throat and started crying. Wah wah wah. Yu was startled by her crying. He looked at her, not knowing what to do. He didn't know why this little one was crying all of a sudden. "Daddy, why is little sister crying?" Muyaja walked over nervously. When he saw little Yueyao crying at the top of her lungs and her little face flushed red, he thought that she was feeling unwell. He was also puzzled. He asked, "Could she be hungry?" Yun Shirshir said strangely, "She just breastfed. Why would she be hungry again?" Xiaoyichen said, "Could it be that it's time to change the diaper?" The confinement nanny said that if little sister pees, she will feel uncomfortable and cry. Muyaja placed little Yueyao on the bed. He took off the diaper and took a look. Her tender little butt was clean. Xiaoyichen took a look and smiled. "Has Daddy been changing little sister's diaper all this time? I see that Daddy's movements are very practiced." Yun Shirshir said, "Your daddy only changes little sister's diaper occasionally. The confinement nanny is usually in charge. I think he's very skilled." Little Yueyao was still crying non-stop. Muyaja held him in his arms and tried all sorts of ways to coax him. He gently patted him, but the little guy didn't seem to give him any face. His little face was still wrinkled, as if he had been greatly wronged, and he cried even harder. Xiaoyichen walked over and said obediently, "Let me sing for little sister. If my sister hears me sing, she definitely won't cry anymore." "Don't," Muyaja said nervously, "you're tone deaf. Don't scare your sister." Xiaoyichen suffered another blow and found it hard to defend himself. Why was Daddy the same as Yu? They always liked to attack him. He was so sad. Just as Xiaoyichen and Yu were feeling dejected, they heard Yun Shirshir say, "It's probably because little sister recognized him. After all, this is your first time hugging her." Xiaoyichen immediately said, "Little sister won't cry when she's in my arms. Could it be that Yu didn't hug her properly? How is that possible?" Yu was a little uneasy. He didn't know what was going on. Little sister was originally fine in his arms, but she suddenly started crying. He was a little worried. Could it be that little sister isn't feeling well? No way. It's probably because she recognized him. She'll be fine after some coaxing. Muyaja hugged Yueyao and coaxed him. However, the strange thing was that after a few coaxes, the little guy's crying gradually weakened. Everyone was amazed. Muyaja patiently coaxed him for a long time. The little guy lay in his arms, staring at him with tears in his eyes. However, he stopped crying. Even Yu was amazed. "Don't cry." Chapter 30:48. "Daddy, let me hug her again. I haven't seen enough yet." Muyaja nodded. However, when Yu walked over and reached out his little hand, Yuyao's nose wrinkled again and she burst into tears again. Yu instinctively retracted his hand and hid to the side. He stared at her innocently as if he had done something wrong. He pinched the corner of his shirt uneasily and looked a little lost. Muyaja looked at Yu's expression. For some reason his heart ached. He immediately coaxed him and said, "Little sister wants to sleep. Is that so?" However, Yu still felt sad. Little sister didn't seem to like him that much. It was fine when Xiaoyichen hugged her or when Daddy hugged her. But why did little sister cry so badly when it was his turn? He felt sad and a little disappointed. He sat by the window and watched helplessly. His heart ached so much that his eyes almost turned red. Muyaja finally coaxed little sister to sleep and placed her in the crib. Shaoqian lay by the bed and watched. However, Yu didn't dare to go closer. He watched from afar, afraid that little sister would cry again if he went closer. Gongjie and Huajin knocked on the door and walked in. Huajin held a box of food in his hand and said, "It's time to eat." While Yun Shishir was hospitalized, Huajin and Gongjie stayed at the hospital every day. Yun Shishir's meals were all taken care of by the confinement nanny. Tonight they specially made white crucian carp soup. It was said that drinking this soup would nourish qi, strengthen the spleen, clear the channels and lower the breast. She drank it for 2 consecutive days and didn't feel anything special. However, there was indeed such a saying. As for Muyaja, Gongjie, and the others, they naturally settled their own meals. If there were no special circumstances, Muyaja basically stayed close to her. When Gongjie and Huajin went out to eat, they would bring back fast food for him. Sometimes it was a box lunch and sometimes it was cooked by Huajin himself. Huajin's culinary skills were not bad, and Muyaja recognized it. Sometimes, he would take the initiative to ask to eat Huajin's cooking. Yu sat at the table unhappily. She held her chopsticks and looked at the sumptuous dishes, but she had no appetite. Gongjie saw this and couldn't help but scratch his nose. "What's wrong? Why do you look so glum?" "Uncle, will little sister cry when you hug her?" Gongjie was a little confused. He raised his eyebrows and said, "No, Yuya doesn't like to cry. She especially likes to laugh. Why are you asking this?" Yu then asked Huajin, "What about Uncle Huajin?" Huajin covered his face and said, I haven't hugged her yet." He wanted to hug her too, but Muyaja and Gongjie both disagreed. Yu was even more disappointed. "Little sister cries a lot when I hug her," Huajin remarked. "Isn't it normal for such a small child to cry and throw a tantrum? But everyone says that little sister loves to laugh and rarely cries. Why did she cry when she was in my arms?" Gongjie rubbed his round face and said, "You can try again next time. Maybe little sister is sleepy and wants to sleep. A baby this big is especially sleepy. Don't think too much, okay?" Oh, Yu had originally thought that this situation was probably just a coincidence, so he didn't think too much about it. However, he didn't expect that this situation would continue to happen. The next day, Yu went to the hospital. The confinement nanny had just changed the baby's diaper. He walked over and asked to hug little sister again. Chapter 3049. After receiving his permission, Yu was elated and carried Yueyao in his arms. However, the little thing was originally grinning from ear to ear. When she was carried in his arms, she did not react at first, but after a while, just like last night, a storm was brewing. She whimpered for a while, blinked her eyes, and 2 drops of tears fell. Her tears fell rapidly and slid down her cheeks. Her cries were earth-shattering as they escaped her little mouth from her throat. Yu was caught off guard. He watched as her little mouth opened wide. He could even see the quivering little tongue in the depths of her throat. Wah! The little one opened her mouth and cried earth-shatteringly. She even lifted her little leg and kicked his arm, as though she despised him. She used a lot of strength. Yu was in pain from the kick, but he didn't dare to let go, for fear that he would hurt his little sister in his arms. The confinement nanny hurriedly took the child from him and coaxed her for a long time. In the end, she still ended up in Yun Shishir's arms. Only then did she stop crying. When Yu saw that this situation had repeated itself, he was extremely upset. He sat in a corner with his handsome brows slightly furrowed. Disappointment was written all over his face. Yun Shishir couldn't see the disappointment on his face, but Muyaja could. He pulled him to the front of the room and stared at his face as he asked, "What's the matter? You don't look happy." "Daddy?" Yu fiddled with his soft fingers, feeling aggrieved. His eyes suddenly reddened and his voice became choked with sobs. He sounded as though he was about to cry. "Does little sister not like me?" Muyaja was stunned. He frowned and asked, "How could that be? Little sister must hate me. Otherwise, why would she cry whenever I hug her?" Yu sobbed as though he had suffered a great grievance. His tears fell instantly. He raised his hand and wiped away the tears at the corners of his eyes. He sniffled and was extremely upset. He rarely cried, and even more rarely showed such a helpless and flustered expression. He always had a calm and collected expression, probably because he was too sad, too upset, and also a little scared. His imagination was running wild, and he was worried that his sister really hated him, so he felt very wronged. Wuxia had never been good at comforting others. Seeing that little munchkin was so upset, he only patted him on the shoulder lightly, but it was difficult to console him. When Yun Shirsher heard this, she felt a sharp pain in her heart. She immediately said, "Yu, don't let your imagination run wild. Little sister, why would little sister hate to you? Then why does she cry whenever I hug her?" He was even more aggrieved. "I didn't want little sister to hate me. To his tearses to s's twos. He's evens to little to us. Twos. I like little sister so much. I think she likes me as her brother too." Wuxia hugged him gently. Xiaoqian was beside them, but he didn't know how to comfort him. At this moment the confinement nanny walked over and said with a smile, "Yu, could it be that the smell of Chinese medicine on you is too strong? Although little sister is still young, her nose is very sensitive. Of course she doesn't like the smell of Chinese medicine." When Xiaoqian heard this, he immediately leaned over and sniffed his body. He nodded and said, "Yeah, the smell of Chinese medicine is indeed a little strong." He had indeed been drinking Chinese medicine for the past few days. "Is that really the case?" Yu stopped crying. He raised both his arms and sniffed himself, but he couldn't smell anything. This was because he had been drinking Chinese medicine and his nose was already used to the smell. He couldn't smell anything strange anymore. Chapter 30-50. His heart wasn't good. Every time the season changed, his heart would palpitate if he didn't take care of it. Hence, he had been drinking Chinese medicine for the past few days. People who drank Chinese medicine would more or less have the smell of Chinese medicine on them. They might not be able to smell it normally because the smell was very faint if they kept a distance. However, when they were close enough they could smell it clearly. Because of that, Yu Yao, who was being held in his bosom, was able to smell it the clearest. Because of that, she began to resist. The child was still young and couldn't speak yet. Hence, she could only cry to express her dissatisfaction. The confinement nanny was just saying it to comfort him, telling him not to take this matter to heart. However, the boy, who loved his sister dearly, kept this matter in his heart. When he got home that night, the nanny had boiled the Chinese medicine and placed it on the table. She called out to him, "Yu, time to drink your medicine." After Yun Shirsher gave birth, Wuxia had arranged for her to go to the best confinement center in the capital for her confinement. During her absence, he had hired a nanny to take care of the two children. Yu walked over and glanced at the Chinese medicine. Suddenly, he remembered how his sister had cried and his heart ached again. It was all this Chinese medicine's fault. He hated this medicine to the core. However, he didn't show it on his face. Instead, he said to the nanny, "Auntie, I'll bring it back to my room to drink. Okay, be careful. It's hot. You can drink it after it cools down." "Okay." Yu picked up the bowl and walked back to his room. The nanny reminded him from behind, "Be careful. Don't spill it." "Okay, got it." Yu carried the bowl back to his room and closed the door. He lowered his head and sniffed it. Instantly he frowned. Indeed, Chinese medicine smelled really bad. If he hadn't been used to it and drank it often, he probably wouldn't have been able to stand the smell. Thinking of Yu Yao, he hesitated for a moment. Then he walked to the bedside, opened the window, and poured the medicine out onto the flower bed. He was smart enough to keep a mouthful and not pour it all out. Every time he drank it, there would be some dregs left. If he poured it all out at once, it would arouse suspicion. After sitting in the room for half an hour, he walked out with the bowl of medicine and placed it on the table. He said to the housekeeper, "It's finished." The nanny walked over with the clean clothes, but she didn't think much of it. She nodded and said, "Leave it there. I'll wash it later." "Yes. Okay, thank you, Auntie." This child, there's no need to be so polite. Yu's thoughtfulness warmed her heart. Hence, she did not realize that the child was doing something behind her back. Xiaoqian was still reading in the study. He still remembered what Yu had said a few days ago. Hence at night he still worked hard. He took out his problem book and racked his brains to calculate. Yu went into the bathroom. When he showered, he used a lot of body wash and rubbed it all over his body. After washing twice and wiping himself clean, he took a whiff. He was still worried, so he secretly rubbed some body wash on himself to make sure that he smelled good. Then he changed into his pajamas and walked into the study. Xiao Chen was still calculating when he suddenly saw his problem book covered by a shadow. Chapter 30:51. Do I smell good? The corner of little Ichen's eyes twitched violently as he sniffed seriously. Yes. It's the scent of shower gel. Does it still smell like Chinese medicine? With Yu's reminder, Xiao Chen was shocked and said, No, I can't smell it anymore. That was strange. Every time he drank the medicine, the smell of Chinese medicine would be very strong. He asked nervously, What's wrong? Did you forget to drink the medicine? I drank it. Really? Every time he drank it, he would smell like Chinese medicine. Don't lie to me. If you stop taking the medicine, you'll... I already said that I drank it. Yu continued. But I used a lot of shower gel and some perfume. My little sister won't despise me if I smell good like this. Xiao Chen smiled and nodded. However, Yu wasn't in a hurry to carry Yue out. Instead, he secretly stopped taking medicine for 2 days. He was only relieved when he didn't smell like Chinese medicine after 2 days. However, when he stood in front of the crib and looked down at the little thing lying in the crib with her eyes wide open and her little feet kicking around, he felt a little scared. He raised his arm solemnly and sniffed his sleeve. When he couldn't smell any Chinese medicine, he took a deep breath and smiled. This was because he was afraid that he wouldn't smell like Chinese medicine this time. At this time, the reason why he resisted the smell of Chinese medicine would no longer be valid. What if his little sister cried again? Then she would really hate him. He was afraid that his little sister wouldn't like him. Xiao Chen encouraged him. Yu, what are you waiting for? Didn't you say that you wanted to carry your little sister? Yu felt uneasy and hesitated for a long time. Then, he carefully carried Yao in his arms. Yu looked at the little girl in his arms. She was sucking on her thumb and looking at him with a pair of curious eyes. Yu's heartbeat suddenly quickened. He was worried that she would cry in the next second. Muyaja looked at him from the side. He saw Yu hugging Yao with a solemn and sincere expression. It was as if the person in his arms was a holy little angel that no one could blaspheme. She stared at him and he stared back at her. Yu held his breath as she stared at him curiously. The little thing's eyebrows had yet to fully develop, and its face was still chubby. This was the real baby fat. Its eyelids were slightly swollen, but its eyeballs were as black as agate. Yet they exuded a lively aura, as if they were the purest spring water in the world. Just as he was feeling extremely nervous, he saw the little thing in his arms smiling at him. Its round eyes curved into 2 small crescent moons. Its childish smile was soundless, but it could melt one's heart. She was especially beautiful when she smiled. At that moment, Yu really felt as if he had seen an angel's smile. The nervousness on his face immediately dissipated. He looked up at Muyaja agitatedly and exclaimed, Daddy! Little sister is smiling at me. I saw it. Yu was extremely touched. He gently rubbed his face against her face and let out a crisp laugh. Little sister, I'm your brother. My name is Yu. Hello. Yu looked up and his gaze landed on Yao's soft face. His handsome eyes were filled with doting laughter. He exhaled softly and said, Yao, welcome. Welcome to this world. Chapter 30:52. This was probably a formal greeting between him and little Yao. Xiao Chen's heart was also warmed by this scene. He walked over to Yu's side and rested his chin gently on his shoulder. He quietly watched the soft little girl stretch her limbs in Yu's arms. She put her chubby little paws in her mouth and curled them up sometimes. You even know how to curl your fingers? Xiao Chen quickly moved her paws away and said, You can't bite your hand. Then, he used his own hand to wipe away the saliva on her hand. Hua Jin laughed beside them. Yao really knows how to reincarnate. She has 2 older brothers who dote on her so much. She's amazing. For some reason, little Yao opened her mouth and spat out a small bubble. She smacked her lips and put her fingers in her mouth again. Her eyes darted around nimbly as she looked at the world around her curiously. Wuxia saw this and was amused. What is she looking at? She's probably looking at the two older brothers. Gongjie walked over and said to Yu, "Let uncle carry her." No. Yu defended her and pouted. Little sister finally stopped crying. "Let me carry her for a while longer." Gongjie frowned as well. "I haven't been able to carry her for the past few days. Little Yueyao wants to see uncle too. Let me have her." Yu turned around and refused to let him have her. Shaoichen was amused by this and said, "From now on, little sister won't have to walk anymore. When we go out, I'll have to carry Yu will have to carry mommy, and uncle and daddy will have to fight with me to carry her. Don't tell me her calves are going to become ornaments?" Yun Shirshir leaned on the bed and said with a smile, "All right. Stop messing around with her. Give her to me. It's time to feed her." When Wuxia heard this, he hurriedly stood up and carried the child into her arms. Then he turned around and looked around meaningfully. Everyone received his gaze and tactfully walked out of the door. Only after everyone had left did she lift her clothes to feed her nipple. While the baby was suckling, Wuxia sat by the bed and looked around. Suddenly he said, "This baby's eyes are like yours. How can you tell?" "I can tell just by looking at the outline of his eyes." Wuxia gently pinched her cheeks, not daring to use too much force. It was just a symbolic touch, and it felt as smooth as milk. He added, "Someone like you will definitely be a beauty when you grow up. Didn't they say that daughters look a little like their fathers?" He still couldn't tell right now, so he couldn't rush to a conclusion. "I think that if a daughter looks like you, she'll be even prettier." Wuxia looked at her, his heart filled with infinite tenderness. It was a little different from when he held Muichin in his arms when he was born. At that time, he hadn't experienced her pregnancy, and he hadn't been by her side to guard her and accompany her through all those joys and sorrows. He hadn't been in the delivery room to witness the arrival of life with his own eyes. Hence, when Muichin was carried into his arms, he looked at him and exclaimed in his heart, "Oh, this is my son." However, although he was happy, he wasn't deeply moved. As Shaoichen grew up, he didn't know how to play the role of a father. He only knew that he couldn't spoil him too much. Otherwise, he would spoil him too much and that wouldn't be good. Chapter 3053. Therefore he was strict with his son. That was his education philosophy. Shaoichen had once been in awe of him. However, when he was with her, the fatherly instinct in him seemed to have finally awakened. He also knew that if he doted on the child properly, the child would not be spoiled, especially when she was preparing for labor. He deeply understood that it was not easy for a little life to come into being. The process in between was mixed with pain and happiness, as well as the anxiety of waiting. Therefore, when he looked at little Yueyao, he was no longer the ignorant father from 8 years ago. He was a mature and steady father. If one were to say that Yun Shirshir's appearance had changed him, for he had always been arrogant and insufferably arrogant. However, she had gently ground away his sharpness and edges, turning him into a man who knew how to love. In that case, Yu Yao's appearance had instilled boundless tenderness into his heart, allowing him to become an even gentler father. When he looked at her, she looked at him too. He suddenly had a feeling in his heart. For her, everything was worth it. He wanted to give her the best things in the world. This feeling might have something to do with the special relationship between father and daughter. Why else would people say that daughters were their father's lovers in their previous lives? With such a special fate, Wuxia's love for Yueyao was even more indescribable. He loved her deeply and wanted to take good care of her. Some children's hair was not thick when they were born. However, little Yueyao had thick black hair, long eyelashes, and fair but healthy skin. When Yun Shirshir was pregnant, she paid attention to the balance of nutrition. In addition, her and Wuxia's genes were not bad. No matter how they gave birth, the child would be good-looking. Therefore, when the nurse carried the child for the injection, the other nurses saw it and were extremely envious. With their rich experience, they could tell at a glance that this child would definitely be a beauty when she grew up. When little Yueyao was given an injection, she attracted a lot of attention. Even the directors of the obstetrics and gynecology department came out when they heard the news. When the child was brought back, the nurse said with relish, "Didn't you see those doctors fighting to carry her? I didn't even let them. They said that this little princess can't recognize people, and would cry if she were to be carried by anyone. They all said how regretful they were. Then they all said that this child would definitely be very good-looking when she grows up." When Wuxia heard this, he raised his eyebrows and said, "Don't you know whose daughter she is?" There was a hint of smugness in his words. He was showing off. The nurse said to Yun Shirshir, "Shirshir, you're so lucky. You have such a handsome husband, a pair of handsome sons, and a daughter who is as beautiful as a little angel. God's favor, God's favor." Before Yun Shirshir could speak, Wuxia said, "You're wrong." "What? What do you mean?" Wuxia gazed at Yun Shirshir affectionately and said, "It's my good fortune to be able to marry her." This sentence was like a piece of sweet candy that melted on the tip of her tongue. The nurse was even more envious and couldn't help but say, "You two are so loving." With that she left. After she left, only the two of them were left in the room. Little Yueyao was asleep, while Gongjia and the others brought Yu and Xiaoichen to Leji Holdings to do some shopping. Chapter 3054. Yu waved his hand and said that he was going to buy clothes, toys and teething sticks for his sister. Gongjia wanted to see the little princess more. But in the end he was dragged away by Yu. Wuxia sneered in his heart. This son of his knew how to read people's faces. He knew that they had not enjoyed their time together for a long time. Recently, Leji had launched a new baby and baby counter. It was said that Yu had suggested it when Yun Shirshir was pregnant. Leji had basically been taken over by Li Hanlin. Li Hanlin had been promoted to CEO of Leji, and Yu had retired behind the scenes. He did not want to waste time on other things. After Yun Shirshir was pregnant, he decided to spend more time with his sister. To welcome his sister, he had especially urged Li Hanlin to develop the baby and baby market. After 8 months of preparation, Leji had launched the baby and baby counter. However, in recent days, there had been complaints from consumers that the baby and baby products in the counter were more targeted at baby girls. This was what Yu had requested. This was one of his selfish reasons. When he had free time, he would scribble on a piece of paper and design some toys for his sister. The product development requires some time, so he had to come up with the idea in advance. When his sister was old enough to play with toys, he wanted to let his sister play with the toys he had designed. Because of the birth of little Yueyao, he did not take care of the Devai project. He threw the half-drawn blueprint aside and did not care about it anymore. Gongjia did not care about it either. Even if he was ambitious about the Devai project, it was not as important as his niece. Even if it was the Hurricane Group's affairs, Yu had also kicked it aside. The room was quiet. Little Yueyao was sleeping soundly. Wuxia lay down on the bed and held her in his arms. She had been sleeping quietly, but was disturbed by his actions. She frowned and felt his hot breath on her cheeks. The next moment, the man lowered his head and kissed her lips. It felt like he hadn't kissed her for a long time. He kissed her, but he didn't dare to take her any deeper. However, when their lips parted, Wuxia lowered his gaze and stared into her eyes. Her beautiful cheeks, which seemed to have been dyed with rouge, and her eyes seemed to be able to hook his soul. He actually could not bear to part with her just like that. Therefore, when she saw him coming up to her again, his large palm forcefully clasping the back of her neck, he almost didn't allow her to retreat even half an inch. The scorching deep kiss, conquering the city, swept through her mouth invasively. She softly snorted, her voice soft and delicate, and her body actually started to heat up slightly. His body also tensed up, and a familiar reaction occurred in a certain part of his body. He instinctively did not want to be restricted to just one kiss. He wanted to have more of her to a greater extent. Their lips tangled together and their breathing gradually quickened. He stared at her, she closed her eyes, but even if she couldn't see, the burning in the man's eyes was self-evident. But when he kissed her collarbone, he forced himself to leave her lips. He wanted her and had endured for almost 10 months, but he deeply understood that now that she had given birth, she could not bear him at all. Chapter 3055. Hubby, it's been hard on you. She was pregnant and it had been hard on her, but it wasn't easy for him either. She had clearly seen how much he had sacrificed for the past 10 months. His forbearance, his tolerance, his care, and his companionship. She could see from every detail that he had sacrificed no less than she had. If their identities could really be swapped, this proud man would also be willing to bear the pain of childbirth for her. Especially during that period when she was extremely depressed, it was also him who had taken her step by step away from that swamp. She suddenly said, "Actually, there's something that I'm really troubled about." Wuxia stroked her silky hair and raised his eyebrows. What is it?" She pondered for a moment and hesitated for a long time before deciding to tell him about it. "Don't you think that we've always done a good job with pregnancy prevention?" Wuxia's eyelids twitched fiercely. Very quickly, he knew what she was puzzled about. "But how did you get pregnant?" Wuxia was still puzzled. "I remember that I've always been taking long-acting contraceptives. Could it be that the contraceptives are useless?" "Contraceptives aren't anything good. Taking too many of them is bad for your health. Don't take them again in the future." He didn't answer her question but deliberately changed the topic. Wuxia's thoughts weren't led away by him. She was still troubled by this topic. "We've done a good job with contraceptives. Not only do I take pills but you also wear condoms sometimes. Logically speaking, it's impossible to get pregnant." Wuxia was a little hesitant to tell her the truth. The reason why the contraceptives had failed was because he had unscrupulously replaced her contraceptives with folic acid. There wasn't much difference between the two types of pills after removing the packaging. She wouldn't necessarily study such small pills in detail. However, he was worried that if she found out that it was his private actions that had caused her to get pregnant, she would be unhappy. After all, this was considered going against her wishes. His sneaky actions didn't seem very honorable. Thus he probed her. "Don't you like your daughter?" "I like her. Of course I like her. I like her a lot." Wuxia was annoyed by him. "What are you talking about? How could I not love my own daughter? After all, it was my own flesh and blood. It was just that I hadn't planned to get pregnant back then, so this child came unexpectedly. However, Wuxia was born, so I felt that I was lucky. It was a blessing to have both a son and a daughter." "You've hit the nail on the head. If you say it's a daughter, then you're really pregnant with a daughter." Wuxia suddenly fell silent. Wuxia added, "This can be considered a beautiful accident." "Actually," Wuxia said, "I've always wanted a daughter." "Yes. But this time, even if you are pregnant with a son, I will still love him very much. So, after some deliberation he said, I had previously replaced your birth control pills with folic acid. So Wuxia's arrival was both within my expectations and beyond my expectations. Because I never thought that my wish would be fulfilled. The heavens have blessed me and fulfilled my wish." Wuxia was stunned for half a second, but there wasn't much change in her expression. She only curved her lips. He thought that she was going to sulk, so he asked a little strangely, "Aren't you angry?" "Huh." Chapter 3056. About the replacement of the birth control pills. Wuxia shook her head. "At first I thought that the birth control pills had failed. After all, the success rate of birth control pills is limited, so I didn't think much of it. Later, I looked through the medicine box and realized that the pills in it were different from the ones I used to take. I only suspected it, but I didn't expect that you were the one who secretly switched the folic acid pills." Wuxia smiled. "It's good that you're not angry." "Why should I be angry? Only my man can think of such a wise decision. Secretly switching the birth control pills with folic acid. This method is very like your style. Amazing. But I don't mean to blame you. It's just that with Wuxia, I really don't want to have any more children. It's not because of the body, but because I don't want my love to be divided into too many parts." Wuxia snuggled into his arms and said gently, "With you Shaoichen and now Wuxia, I feel that I'm the happiest woman in the world. I don't want anything else. I just want all of you to be safe and happy. That's enough. I don't want you to have any more children either." Wuxia said, "I didn't experience it before, but now that I've accompanied you through childbirth, I feel that giving birth is really too much for a woman. I'm very satisfied with having 3 children." Wuxia nodded. "Then we have to take care of the birth control measures in the future. Otherwise, if another beautiful accident happens, I don't know whether to laugh or cry." Then if I become a high-risk pregnant woman, I'll really suffer. It's not good to take too many birth control pills. If you wear a condom, it won't be 100% successful. How about I go for a vasectomy when I've recovered a little? Yun Shirshir said with a smile. Muyaja was stunned and frowned. No. A vasectomy is just a small operation. It will also prevent a lot of unnecessary trouble. Since they were discussing this topic, Yun Shirshir also wanted to talk to him about it. Hubby, you know me. In this life I've decided on you. I don't want anyone else but you. Therefore, this reproductive function can be removed from my life. In my life I will only have these 3 children. There will be no other children. Since there's a chance that something might go wrong with contraception, why don't we avoid it completely? I heard that ligation is not good for women's health. Since we're talking about this topic, I might as well tell you my decision. What decision? Muyaja said solemnly. I plan to have a sterilization operation. Well, what? Yun Shirshir was a little surprised. This man actually told her personally that he was going to undergo sterilization surgery. What did this mean? This meant that he would be permanently infertile. In fact, sterilization surgeries were mostly performed by men in Europe and America. This was because sterilization surgeries for men were relatively less risky. They could recover in a very short period of time. Basically, they could return to work right after the surgery without any side effects. A few days after Muyaja gave birth, the doctor asked him if he would consider having Yun Shirshir undergo a vasectomy operation since they already had 3 children. It was the first time he had heard of this term and he was a little puzzled. Hence, he asked around to find out what a vasectomy operation was. Chapter 3057. The doctor explained that both men and women could undergo ligation surgery. However, male sterilization was less risky, and the chances of complications would be greatly reduced. Moreover, the failure rate was extremely low, so there was basically no need to worry about the consequences. If a woman underwent ligation, she would have to face the risk of an ectopic pregnancy. For example, an ectopic pregnancy, if it lasted for a long time, it would affect her health, causing inflammation and infection. In that case, it would need to be removed and reoperated. However, in such an environment in the country, most men were very resistant to such surgery. This might have something to do with the deep-rooted patriarchal society that remained in the bones of the men in the country. They felt that such surgery was the greatest blasphemy to a man's face. Most men felt that a man bearing the responsibility of contraception meant that his status was degraded. Moreover, fertility was seen as the core of many men's identity. Sterilization was misunderstood as male castration. Many men even thought that if they were to one day achieve meteoric success and divorce their wives, then they would no longer be able to have children of their own. Many people did not want to give up this path of retreat. In addition, many men treated women as their personal belongings. This was because this kind of respect was hard to show. After all, carrying on the family line was the most important task of men in society. However, Muyaja felt that if the slightest risk appeared on her, then he had to put an end to it. He was determined to put an end to it. How could he let his woman take such a risk? Even if it was only 0.1%, he was determined not to do it. Moreover, he had no worries at all because this woman, this great woman, had already fulfilled his greatest wish by giving him a daughter. Thus, there was no need for him to keep his fertility. He had decided that this woman, would be the only woman in his life who could accompany him to the end of his life. He only had one wife, and his child could only be born of him and her. After the sterilization, he would not have to worry about those messy women coming to sow discord in the future. He had such concerns too. After all, regardless of whether he was married or not, there were still many women who coveted his life. There was no guarantee that another woman like Song Enya would appear and use despicable means. However, after he was sterilized, he would no longer have such concerns. When that time came, if another woman came to him and said that she was pregnant with his child, then this stupid wife of his would have the confidence to give her a tight slap. The doctor had also explained to him that if a man underwent sterilization, a very small incision would be made to remove the vas deferens and cut it into segments. This surgery might sound scary. However, in his opinion, a woman's sterilization surgery was even more inhumane. For a woman to undergo sterilization, she had to cut her abdomen open, and the fallopian tubes on both sides were more than 10 centimeters apart. He rejected it right away. However, in bed he did not like to wear condoms. He always felt that it was not very comfortable. Moreover, in a certain aspect he was very sensitive. Therefore, this feeling of discomfort was infinitely magnified. In the past, he did not wear condoms because he hoped to have another daughter. Now that he had a son and a daughter, he could not bear to see her go through childbirth again. He thought that since he did not like to wear condoms, then he would sterilize her. Chapter 3058. However, Yun Shirshir couldn't bear it. She felt that his sacrifice was too heavy. However, her worries were nothing in Muyaja's eyes. After all, women were the carriers of new life. They had to menstruate every month, and this was already a huge burden. Pregnancy took 10 months. After giving birth, their figures would be out of shape and would take a long time to recover. They also had to consider confinement and breastfeeding. What about men? If they wanted children, they just had to be responsible for sowing the seeds. If they accidentally got pregnant, they just had to fork out the money. The woman would still be the one suffering. In this aspect, women were at too much of a disadvantage. Hence he made this decision. He hugged her tightly and said, "I don't have to consider that our marriage won't last long, and I don't have to consider having children in the future. The risk of sterilization is small. This is my decision. I'm just informing you. It's not a discussion. As long as you know it, you don't have to say anything." His attitude was very firm. This was just a notification, not a discussion, and he didn't intend to ask for her opinion. When Yun Shirshir heard this, she was extremely touched. This man was worried about her having to undergo a vasectomy. What was even more unexpected was that he had already made his decision long ago. However, such words were very much like his style. Perhaps, if she hadn't mentioned this, he would have hidden it from her and secretly done the surgery before mentioning it to her. He wasn't good with words and always gave silently. In his mind, he would give for someone willingly as long as it was worth it. However, giving was giving, and he wouldn't give for some purpose. He loved her. He only loved her. He loved her without reservation. It was just that pure. Yun Shirshir was touched by his thoughtfulness and tolerance. She was even more touched by his love. She wrapped her arms around his shoulders, leaned forward and kissed him on the cheek. "Hubby. Thank you." Muyaja's lips curled into a smile. Just as he was about to kiss her on the lips, the door to the ward was suddenly pushed open. He looked up sharply and saw Gongjia standing at the door. He looked a little embarrassed when he saw this ambiguous scene. Behind him, Hua Jin was blocked outside the door by his Gongjia. Seeing that he was in a daze, he pushed him on the shoulder and said, "Why aren't you going in?" Yu and Xiaoichen poked their heads in from both sides of his legs. They were surprised to see Muyaja and Yun Shirshir hugging each other. Xiaoichen said angrily, "Daddy, you're despicable. Did you purposely send us away so that you can enjoy some alone time with Mommy?" "Daddy is the most cunning," Yu said. Muyaja glared at Gongjia. "Why didn't you knock before coming in?" I didn't expect you guys to be so intimate. There's no sign on the door that says no entry." However, in his heart, he was thinking that this Muyaja had purposely sent him away so that he could dominate his sister. This was too much. Muyaja snorted coldly, but he didn't let go of Yun Shirshir. Since they had been caught, there was no need to hide it. He was hugging his woman and kissing her. It wasn't something embarrassing. Gongjia was the first to walk to the crib. After taking the best position, he wanted to hug the baby Yueyao. Chapter 3059. Sensing that someone was touching her, she gave a forceful kick like a little bunny and kicked Gongjia's big palm away. "Eh? You're so strong?" Gongjia found this to be extremely amusing. However, when he saw that her little feet were still bouncing up and down, he had the urge to tease her. He reached out his long fingers and gently tickled the soles of her feet through her socks. Little Yueyao was very sensitive. As Gongjia teased her, her little legs kicked even harder. "Haha, you're like a little rabbit." Yu and Xiaoichen immediately came over to take a look. They saw that little Yueyao's legs were like the paws of a little rabbit. She was kicking and kicking, and her eyebrows were slightly furrowed. She seemed a little unhappy. Yu was eager to protect his little sister. He immediately said, "Uncle, Don't disturb your little sister's sleep. You've slept for so long. Have you slept enough? The man smiled and grasped the little thing's tiny feet with his large palm. Revealing his pearly white teeth, he looked devilish and unrestrained. Little Yueyao was woken up by him. Her face was wrinkled and she looked like she was going to cry again. When a child didn't sleep well, she would cry to vent her dissatisfaction. Gongjie said, "Oh," he calmly coaxed. "Don't make a fuss, don't make a fuss. Uncle will carry you. Uncle will dote on you." Yu, who was standing at the side, could not help but burst into laughter. He felt that such an arrogant man like his uncle was carrying such a cute little thing in his arms. He was like an ordinary stay-at-home dad, coaxing his daughter with infinite tenderness. It was hard to imagine that this man was the most terrifying chief commander of Hurricane Group, Gongjie. Wasn't the difference in their image a little too big? Yu couldn't stop laughing. Gongjie saw that he was laughing and said angrily, "What are you laughing about?" Yu cleared his throat and smiled elegantly. "Nothing. I just feel that, uncle. Why are you so cute?" Gongjie awkwardly moved his face away and snorted coldly, looking very arrogant. Muyaja turned around and said to her, "I'll prepare for the operation in the next 2 days. Don't worry." "Isn't it too rushed?" "No, it's just a small operation. It doesn't require much effort and energy." Muyaja said to her again, "You just have to focus on your confinement and recuperate. You still have to prepare for the wedding." "Wedding? Aya, how could I forget about this?" Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I was so focused on my little Yueyao that I forgot that someone still owes me a grand wedding. You may have forgotten, but I haven't. However, you'll have to wait until your eyes recover. Otherwise, how regretful will you be if you can't see how beautiful you look in your wedding dress?" Yun Shirshir was a little pessimistic. She said a little uneasily, "I heard that cornea donors are not easy to come by, and we might not be able to seize the opportunity. I'm just worried that, by the time my eyes recover, Yueyao will have already grown up." Yu immediately said, "Mommy is letting her imagination run wild again. With Daddy and Uncle around, Mommy doesn't have to worry for nothing. Everyone says that Yueyao is good-looking, but unfortunately, I haven't seen it." Yun Shirshir suddenly sighed. "It's such a pity that my daughter has been born, but I can't take a good look at her. I wonder when I'll be able to see what she looks like?" Chapter 3060. Little Yueyao, do you know? Mommy doesn't want to miss a single moment of your life. Hua Jin was sitting at the side. When he heard this, he couldn't help but look a little stunned. He suddenly stood up and instructed the nanny to take good care of Yun Shirshir. Then, he walked to Muyaja's side and patted his shoulder gently. He pointed to the door, indicating that he had something to say to him. Muyaja nodded, got up and walked out of the door with him. As if afraid that Yun Shirshir would hear their conversation, Hua Jin walked to the balcony and stopped. Muyaja walked over and asked him, "What's the matter?" he asked. Shirshir's eyes. "Do you have a way to find a suitable donor?" Muyaja saw the anxiety in his eyes and thought that this matter had been troubling him for a long time. He said, "You don't have to worry." "How can I not be worried? There's been no news for so long and there's no suitable donor. I'm waiting too. What if there's no news?" Hua Jin was even more anxious now. Shirshir wants to see little Yueyao, but it's already a luxury. My heart aches when I see her, and I hope that she can have the operation as soon as possible. Muyaja frowned but remained silent for a long time. Seeing that he was silent, Hua Jin thought that he was also worried about this matter. He couldn't help but say softly, "If you really can't find one, use mine?" As soon as he said this, Muyaja was stunned. He was extremely shocked. "Yours?" "Yeah." Hua Jin nodded heavily and immediately explained, "Brother-in-law, don't worry. I'm willing to do it. If Shirshir can see it, I'm willing to give up my cornea. Also, you don't have to worry about me seeing it. I've asked the doctor and he said that even one cornea is fine." No. Muyaja felt that it was ridiculous. He didn't expect this guy to not only talk about it but also ask the doctor in advance. Hua Jin asked, "Why not? Didn't the doctor tell you that a living person's cornea can't be removed?" Hua Jin was stunned. He was indeed not clear about this matter. He only asked the doctor if it was possible to operate on a single cornea. The doctor's answer was yes. He thought that if there was really no donor, then he would use his own eye to exchange for Yun Shusher's eye. Brother-in-law, it shouldn't be a problem if you rely on your connections, right? I can sign the agreement. If it's voluntary, there won't be any disputes. Are you crazy? Muyaja scolded. If she finds out that she used your cornea, what do you want her to think? Of course I can't tell her. Hua Jin said firmly. Brother-in-law, I once promised Shusher that if one day she really can't see, I will be her eyes. Muyaja interrupted him. No means no. Brother-in-law. Hua Jin was a little angry. If I knew that you wouldn't agree, then I wouldn't have told you. I have a donor. Muyaja suddenly interrupted him. Hua Jin was shocked. What? I have a donor. Chapter 3061. Muyaja smirked and said coldly, I don't want to use that donor because I think that donor is dirty. So I'm waiting. I'm waiting for an excellent donor. If it doesn't work, I'll consider using that person's donor. That person? Hua Jin was even more confused. Who? Muyaja decided not to hide it from him. He said, Come with me somewhere, okay? Okay. Muyaja brought him to Yulong Bay. Hua Jin followed him to the basement. He made a call and someone immediately opened the shutter door. Two men came out and greeted him with smiles on their faces. Chairman Mu, you're here? How is she? She's still the same, but she's willing to eat a little. She doesn't eat much and relies on the nutrient solution to sustain herself. Hua Jin was baffled. Muyaja turned to look at him and said, Come in. The two of them walked in and saw that the warehouse had been converted into a dungeon. Through the iron bars, Hua Jin could see the skinny and dirty woman tied to the bed at a glance. The reason why it was dirty was because Yun Na had not taken a shower since the day she was locked up. Her clothes were dirty and stained with vomit and dust. Even though there were people who would usually clean her up, her body would resist the foredrip, and sometimes she would vomit. Who is this? Yun Na. Hua Jin suddenly understood. He knew the name Yun Na. He also knew that Gu Xing's death and Yun Shusher's blindness were related to this woman. He suddenly understood why Muyaja had imprisoned her here. This was to nourish her pair of eyes. He could not help but sigh. This man was too two-faced. He kept Yun Na and kept her here until Yun Shusher could undergo surgery. Then, he removed her cornea and transplanted it to Yun Shusher. But I think her eyes are dirty. I won't use her cornea unless it's absolutely necessary. Muyaja frowned and said, So I'm also waiting for a suitable donor. Therefore, the worst-case scenario was to transplant her cornea to Shusher. Don't let your imagination run wild. I'm her man. I'm going to spend the rest of my life with her. I will be responsible for her. Hua Jin felt relieved and nodded. When Yun Na saw Muyaja, she became excited. She immediately sat up and shouted at him. Muyaja, how long are you going to imprison me? Tell me, what is your goal? Let's go, it's dirty here. Muyaja didn't want to stay any longer. Hua Jin nodded as well. The two of them turned around and decided to leave. Behind him, Yun Na shouted herself hoarse. Muyaja, if you're still a man, then kill me if you have the guts. What is your motive for locking me up and trapping me here? Tell me. Muyaja acted as if he didn't hear her and left with Hua Jin. When Yun Na saw Muyaja and Hua Jin's departing figures, she broke down even more and shouted at him. Muyaja, let me go. Let me go. I know I was wrong. I don't want to live like this anymore. Don't go. I beg you. Let me go. However, what answered her was the heavy sound of the shutter door closing. The world isolated her again. Yun Na collapsed on the bed in despair. She wanted to cry, but she couldn't shed any tears. Chapter 3062. Her heart sank to the bottom of the valley once again. For the past few months, she had been trying to figure out Muyaja's intentions. She didn't know what this man's intentions were for locking her up here, feeding her, and keeping her alive. What exactly did he want from her after racking his brains? Yun Na sat on the bed and wailed at the top of her lungs. She wanted to grab her hair, which was as dry as straw, but the handcuffs were tightly locked around her wrists. Now, she couldn't do anything other than breathe when she opened her eyes and sleep when she closed them. The long period of captivity was about to torture her to the point of mental breakdown. The two men sent Muyaja away. When they returned, they heard Yun Na's tragic cries. They scolded her in disgust. "Shut up! What are you screaming for?" "Ah!" Yun Na screamed even louder. She said hysterically, "Why didn't you kill me? Why didn't you kill me?" F***ck. She's getting louder and louder. One of the burly men said, "Go and gag her." The other man nodded and immediately walked over with a dirty rag. When Yun Na saw it, she kept retreating. That rag was used to wipe the table and shoes, but these people wanted to gag her with it. She kept shouting and yelling, full of resistance. The man wanted to stuff the rag into her mouth, but she didn't hesitate at all. She opened her mouth and bit his wrist hard. The man groaned in pain. The muscles all over his body tensed up, and he instinctively slapped her face to the side. "Are you a dog? You're biting people. F***ck. He grabbed her hair and shoved the rag into her mouth without giving her a chance to protest. Yun Na stared at them with tears in her eyes, but she could only whimper. They looked at her as if they were sizing up a bug in a smelly ditch. The man turned around and asked, "Why did Siyomu come here today?" The other man said, "Probably to see how she's doing. After all, she's been imprisoned for so long. I'm afraid she's useless." "Ha! How can she be useless? I won't starve to death. I heard that President Mu's daughter has been born. Once Mrs. Mu is done with her confinement, the surgery will be arranged soon." As soon as he finished speaking, Yun Na, who had her head lowered, suddenly raised it and stared at them in shock. However, the man did not notice her urgent gaze. Instead, he started chatting with her. He had been guarding Yun Na all this time, and it was extremely boring. Thus, when he was bored, he casually chatted with her. "Haven't you heard? Chairman Mu gave birth to a little princess. Now that he's here to see me, he's probably going to prepare for the transplant, right? Mrs. Mu's eyes are still waiting for a cornea donor. Oh, I remember now. If it weren't for this woman's eyes, Chairman Mu wouldn't have kept her alive until now. Madame Mu is really pitiful. She's been blinded by this little B***T. She must get revenge on her." "What?" Yun Na's eyes widened in anger as she listened, but she was so scared that she didn't even dare to breathe loudly. She held her breath and listened to their idle chatter. However, a man who had just arrived asked curiously, "Say, why didn't you perform the cornea transplant earlier?" Chapter 3063. The man sucked in a breath of cold air. "Cornea? Don't tell me he's going to remove the cornea from this woman's eyes while she's still alive? What else? Do you still pity her? This woman is very despicable. She brought this upon herself. Tisk tsk. No, he can't do that." Yun Na suddenly leaned against the wall in fear. She couldn't believe that Muyaja would be so cruel. "What do you mean he can't do that? This is the debt you owe and you should pay it back. If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? Tell me, your sister is Madame Mu. You can live a good life, but you have to commit such a sin. What's the point?" Yun Na's breathing suddenly quickened. She opened her mouth but couldn't say anything. It turned out that Muyaja kept her alive and didn't punish her or torture her because of her eyes. She finally understood. But she couldn't. She wasn't afraid of pain, but she couldn't accept it. Why? Why did he treat her like this? Did the heavens think that she hadn't been tortured enough? She could give her eyes to anyone but Yun Shirshir. That name made her hate her to the core. After Muyaja's visit, Yun Na found out about this matter and could not recover from it for a long time. In the beginning, when she was making a ruckus, she even used all means to anger the men guarding her, hoping that they would beat her to death in a fit of anger. However, after the excitement and nervousness, she suddenly thought it through. She stopped arguing and quieted down. Her heart was like a stagnant pool without any ripples. She had figured out one thing and was secretly planning how to carry it out. That night, the few of them prepared dinner and were about to eat when Yun Na suddenly said, "I want to eat." When the man heard this, he was surprised. This woman had never been willing to eat obediently. Most of the time, she relied on the nutrient solution to survive. Sometimes they were afraid that it wasn't good to be on the nutrient solution all the time, so they would force feed her, but she didn't cooperate at all. Now that she took the initiative to ask for food, the man felt that it was extremely deliberate. The man kissed her angrily. Why are you saying that you want to eat for no reason again? Didn't you refuse to eat in the past? I'm hungry. I want to eat meat. I want to eat rice. Can't I do that? Yun Na was overbearing and her gaze was fierce. When the man saw her attitude, he became even angrier. You stinking woman, I'm talking to you properly. Why are you acting like a mad dog? Yun Na sneered and said, I want to eat. If you don't give it to me, then I won't eat. They looked at each other, feeling suspicious and even more vigilant. You're not going to play any tricks, are you? Yun Na, on the other hand, was so angry that she laughed. You've tied my hands and legs, so what can I do? Moreover, look at all of you. You're such big men. Don't tell me you're afraid that you can't handle a woman like me who's about to become a cripple? You're quite sharp-tongued. All right, I got it. The man served her rice, vegetables and meat, then walked to the bed and said that he wanted to feed her. However, Yun Na said, I'll eat it myself. What? Uncuff me, I'll eat it myself. As Yun Na said this, she glared at him fiercely. I won't eat what you feed me. The man became even angrier and finally lost his patience. What are you doing? I'll feed you. Don't play any tricks on me. Chapter 3064. I won't eat what you feed me. The man almost smashed his bowl as he asked angrily, Are you going to eat or not? Yun Na was still stubborn. I want to eat by myself. Why? Is this woman trying to escape? Yun Na was aggressive. Do you think I can escape? I don't have my handcuffs, but my ankles are still cuffed. Where can I escape to? When the man heard this, he uncuffed her with suspicion, but his face was still a little wary. With a click, the handcuffs were uncuffed. Yun Na's hands were finally free. She looked up and saw the man staring at her covetously, as if afraid that she would do something rash. She could not help but sneer. Why are you still so worried when my legs are cuffed? Even if I have wings, I can't fly out of here. I've just thought it through and want to live a good life. Thought it through. The man snorted. It's fine as long as you've thought it through. With that, he was no longer so vigilant. He sat at the side, but he did not dare to be too far away from her. His gaze was still on her. Yun Na did not look at him anymore. She picked up the bowl, held the chopsticks, and casually ate a mouthful of rice, wolfing it down. Seeing that she was eating obediently, the man relaxed even more. You should have done this earlier. If you were willing to eat by yourself earlier, you wouldn't have to suffer so much. Yun Na didn't even raise her head, and didn't even look at him as she continued to eat. This rice was fragrant, but it was a little bitter. It turned out that tears had slipped into her mouth unknowingly, and it tasted astringent. Yun Na wiped away her tears fiercely. When she thought of how happy Yun Shirshir was at this moment, she thought of how she was being pampered by so many people. She was as noble as the clouds, but what about her? Everyone wanted to trample on her. She was as lowly as mud. And that Yun Tianyu. He was still very smug now, right? When she was thrown into the sea, her heart was filled with despair. But God gave her a chance. She hung onto a piece of driftwood and drifted on the sea for an entire night. Just when she thought she was about to freeze and sink into the sea, a fishing boat finally passed by and pulled her onto the boat. She was reborn. After that, she used guns and knives to think of ways to erase the traces of her existence. Because she felt that Yun Na was already dead. And she was a ghost that had climbed up from hell. A malicious spirit that was born for revenge. She wanted Yun Shirshir and Yun Tianyu to pay with their lives. So she spent a long time coming up with a series of plans for revenge. Especially a few months later, when Li Qin's body was salvaged from the shore and she saw the rotten corpse, she was even more convinced. Yun Na suddenly wiped away the oil stains on her mouth. She raised her head and said coldly, Is Muyaja going to use my eyes as a cornea donor for Yun Shirshir? Isn't that something you should ask? Yun Na became agitated. He put in so much effort to raise me for this purpose? The man snorted but did not answer. Chapter 3065. No one paid any attention to her, but she kept talking to herself, as if she wanted to vent the foul air in her chest. What about now? She wants to take my eyes away again? On what basis? On what basis? How much more does she want to take from me? Haha. Muyaja wants to transplant my eyes to her. But he thinks I'm dirty. He's using me but he hates me at the same time. That's the most hateful thing. When Yuna thought of this, she finally made up her mind. She lowered her head and laughed sinisterly. However, I won't let him get away with it. What do you mean? Yuna lowered her head and suddenly gripped her chopsticks tightly with both hands. She gripped them so hard that it seemed like she was going to break the chopsticks. Her hands were trembling non-stop, and she suddenly laughed miserably. Ha ha ha. Muyaja, I won't let you get away with it. The man was startled by her laughter. He turned his head abruptly and scolded her angrily. What are you laughing at? Be quiet. His voice stopped abruptly. This was because he saw Yuna gripping the two chopsticks tightly. Her gaze was ferocious and mournful, and her entire body was trembling violently. When she raised her head again, her eyes were bloodshot and filled with monstrous hatred and anger. She raised her hand and stared at the chopsticks. A certain conviction in her eyes became more and more firm. The man shouted, What are you doing? Yuna suddenly shouted hysterically, I won't let you get away with it. Her mournful voice broke violently. The man seemed to have guessed what she was going to do. He immediately stood up from the chair and rushed toward her. However, in just a few seconds, Yuna did not hesitate. She used the sharpest end of the chopsticks to aim at her own eyes and ruthlessly stabbed them into them. She really used a lot of force and was extremely ruthless. The man could not stop her in time. In the next second, he saw the two chopsticks stab into her eyes, and blood splattered everywhere. Yuna immediately let out a heart-wrenching scream. Ah! The heart-wrenching scream almost broke through the roof and pierced through the clouds. Yuna suddenly pulled out the chopsticks, covered her eyes and fell onto the bed. Because of the immense pain, her body kept convulsing. It was so painful. The pain was heart-wrenching. The sharp object pierced into her eye and pierced through her eyeball. She was in so much pain that she screamed in agony. Her body kept rolling around on the bed. Blood dripped from the corner of her eyes onto the dirty bedsheets. She was in so much pain that she was about to faint. As Yuna screamed, she thought about how she had destroyed her eyes and Yun Shirshir had lost this donor. She was pleased with herself and laughed bitterly. Ha 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 ha. She was crying, laughing, and screaming at the top of her lungs. She looked so crazy that it was frightening. Just looking at this scene was enough to make one tremble in fear. One could imagine how painful it was. At the side, several people were stunned. No one had ever seen such a terrifying scene. After a while, Yuna actually fainted from the pain. In the hospital, Muyaja received a call saying that something had happened to Yuna. He raised his eyebrows but did not appear too nervous. Instead, he said coldly, I'll be right there. He drove to Yulong Bay. Just as he walked into the basement, a musty smell hit him in the face. A few doctors surrounded the bed. They had just finished the operation and the anesthesia had just worn off. Yuna slowly woke up. Chapter 3066. Muyaja asked in a deep voice. What's going on? Standing at the side, the few men in charge of guarding Yuna immediately said uneasily. This woman said that she wanted to eat by herself. We were already very careful, but we didn't expect this woman to be so ruthless. She used her chopsticks to stab her eyes. The more he spoke, the weaker his voice became. Yuna gradually regained consciousness. When she heard Muyaja's voice, she suddenly laughed coldly. Muyaja! Give up! Ha ha ha! You want to use my cornea to restore Yun Shirshir's vision? Dream on! I won't let you have your way. When Muyaja heard this, his face remained calm. He said slowly, What gave you such a misunderstanding that made you think that I want to use your eyes to replace Shirshir's eyes? When Yuna heard this, her face was filled with shock. She suddenly reacted and sneered. You don't mean what you say. I heard what they said. They said that you used me to get my cornea. Muyaja said expressionlessly, Your eyes are so dirty. Are you worthy of being Shirshir's eyes? Then, Yuna didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She asked angrily, Why did you keep me alive? My father-in-law said that he wanted to keep you alive. When he comes back, he will punish you properly. At this point, Muyaja looked very regretful. Why do you think I kept you alive? You said that I coveted your cornea. Yuna, are you worthy? When Yun Na heard this, her blood rushed to her head. She had never thought that she would deliberately use her last bit of value to destroy Yun Shirshir, even if it would break her hope and make her despair. However, she didn't expect that Muyaja had never wanted to use her eyes to restore Yun Shirshir's vision. She still couldn't believe it, because if he didn't think so, then what was the point of destroying her eyes and suffering such unbearable pain for nothing? She broke down and shouted at him, "You're lying!" Muyaja stared at her coldly, but she couldn't see him. She just kept yelling, "You must be doing this for my eyes. It must be for my eyes. You must be very disappointed that I destroyed my eyes, right? It must be very painful. Ha ha ha." After a short moment of silence, Muyaja smiled coldly and said, "Yun Na, you're really pitiful." Then he turned around and left without looking back. Yun Na still couldn't stop herself from laughing, and she maintained her pitifully weak dignity. However, when he left, her smile became even more miserable. In the end, as he laughed and laughed, he actually started to cry in despair. "Muyaja, I hate you. I curse you. You will die a horrible death. Die a horrible death. Yun Shirshir, you will definitely suffer retribution. Even if retribution doesn't fall on you, it will fall on your child. Let your child pay for your debt. Ha ha ha." Yun Na didn't hesitate to curse him with the most vicious curse in the world. However, everyone looked at her as if she was a pitiful child beggar. No one cared about her. After Muyaja left, Minyu followed at the side, wanting to say something but hesitating. He turned around to look at Minyu and said, "If you have something to say, just say it." Chapter 3067. "No. Then you," Minyu said. "That's not what you said before. I deliberately revealed this information because I knew that if she knew about it, she would definitely destroy her eyes by hook or by crook." Muyaja said coldly, "She destroyed her eyes with her own hands and then found out that no one wanted her eyes. That feeling of despair must be very painful." Minyu couldn't help but shudder. However, he felt that this was the boss's style of doing things. "I thought you would torture her ruthlessly. A woman like Yun Na is already a living dead. Hatred is engraved in her bones. Physical torture can no longer shake her. Even if she is tortured until she is covered in scars, she won't feel anything. How much do you think a woman who didn't hesitate to burn her own fingerprints for revenge can feel about physical pain? Moreover, pure torture can't vent the hatred. Such a person can't be regretted even if she dies 10,000 times." Minyu shuddered even more when he recalled Yun Na's miserable appearance. Muyaja suddenly stopped in his tracks and came back to his senses. He sneered meaningfully. "Don't you think that destroying a person mentally is the cruelest way?" Minyu agreed. A few days later, there was another piece of news. Yun Na had gone crazy. She had completely gone crazy. The long period of confinement had already tortured her to the point of collapse. Coupled with the sudden and severe mental trauma, her mental state became crazy. Muyaja sent someone to send her to the mental hospital. However, not long after, there was news of Yun Na's death. She ran to the rooftop alone and jumped down from the 7-story rooftop. She committed suicide by falling off the building. A few nurses could have stopped her, but Yun Na was crazy. If they tried to stop her, they were afraid that they would hurt the innocent. Therefore, when they called Muyaja to ask how to deal with it, he said, "If she wants to die, let her be." After Yun Na fell to her death, she hastily took care of her funeral. Such a life had finally come to an unbearable end. Naturally, Muyaja wouldn't let Yun Shirshir know about this. However, the news of Muyaja falling off a building was still published by the media. Hua Jin accidentally saw the headlines in the newspaper and hurriedly went to look for Muyaja. "Didn't you say that you wanted to keep Yun Na and use her cornea for Shirshir? You never intended to use her eyes, did you?" "Yes." "Then," Hua Jin gasped, "what about Shirshir?" Muyaja looked into his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Before the wedding, I will find a donor as soon as possible and perform the surgery." "Isn't the probability too slim?" Hua Jin added, "The wedding is imminent. What if we can't find a cornea donor before the wedding?" "You don't have to worry about this. As for her, she doesn't have to worry about this either. I'm her man. I'll take care of it." It was hard for Hua Jin to believe that he would be able to handle this matter well. After returning to the villa, He opened the door and saw Yun Shirshir sitting on the sofa, hugging Yue Yao. Her face was gentle and focused. Chapter 3068. He bit his lip and seemed to have made a serious decision. When he returned to his room, he found a number on his phone. After hesitating for a long time, he dialed it. Dr. Chung? Yes, it's me. Can you arrange for the surgery immediately? Yes, I've made my decision. This doctor was the authoritative expert that Hua Jin had contacted. It was impossible to remove the cornea of a living body, but he was probably touched by Hua Jin's persistence. He vaguely said that he knew of a way to remove the cornea of a living person. However, this was against the law. Therefore, his words were extremely vague and did not reveal anything. Hua Jin talked to him over the phone and roughly agreed on the cost and time of the surgery. Then he hung up the phone. He sat on the bed and pondered for a long time. It was impossible to say that he was not afraid of the surgery. However, if it was Yun Shirshir, he would be happy to be her eyes. The main thing was that he had been waiting for more than 10 months and his patience had been exhausted. If he really had to wait for a cornea donor, he didn't know how long it would take. Hence, he thought that he might as well use his own cornea. Hua Jin stood up and walked to the door. When he opened the door, he saw Yun Shirshir standing at the door. Her eyes were empty and unfocused. When she heard the door open, she frowned and opened her mouth slightly. Hua Jin. Her voice was trembling and there was a hint of fear in it. Hua Jin was stunned. He didn't know how long she had been standing at the door, and how long she had been listening to his conversation with the doctor through the door. Sis! He had just said one word when Yun Shirshir raised her hand and gave him a slap. However, this slap was probably just to wake him up. It wasn't heavy, but her whole body was trembling and her eyes were red. You said that you want to do a cornea removal surgery? Are you planning to transplant your cornea to me? Hua Jin's face darkened. His fringe covered his eyes and he didn't say anything. Perhaps it was because he felt guilty that he didn't know how to respond to her anger. I won't take your eyes. Yun Shirshir's attitude was firm and she said firmly, even if I can't see for the rest of my life, I won't want your eyes. I don't want to. If you dare to do such a thing behind my back, I will cut all ties with you. Shirshir. Hua Jin was anxious and frightened. He immediately grabbed her hand and coaxed her nicely. Sister, I know I was wrong. Don't be angry, okay? Yun Shirshir shook off his hand. She was still very angry. Hua Jin became even more anxious and hurriedly said, I just want your eyes to recover as soon as possible. Yun Shirshir suddenly froze. Hua Jin knew that she was really angry, and immediately tried to please her gently. Shirshir, I was wrong. I'm sorry, okay? Please don't be angry with me. I promise you I will never mention this matter again. I won't do the surgery behind your back. But I really feel sorry for you. Didn't I say before that if there really comes a day when you can't see anything, I will be your eyes? But I didn't expect that day to really come.